Thank you. Okay, good evening. Welcome to Freeport High School Library. It's Wednesday, February 13th, 2019. And we have a couple of folks apparently up front. We're both out, not going to be making it tonight. And then given the snow day, the student reps were given the evening off as well. So, but given how many meetings we have in the next couple months, we all braved the storm, and I appreciate everybody who made it tonight. So we'll get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Adjustments to the agenda. We are going to reorder some things, yeah?
Yes, I'd love to do the social emotional workshop right after public comment, because we have quite a few of our teachers here this evening that, even though it was a snow day for them, they have come in, and so would like to do the workshop and then allow them to leave.
They're not interested in the budget review? No, I think that's a great idea. So assuming there's no issues with that, we will move our, I think it's under new business, number 13. We'll move that up right after 7. Okay, perfect. Good news and recognition, report from the student rep. Just made up 10 minutes on our agenda. So public comment. So if anyone wants to speak, we just ask you to come to the mic. Let us know who you are. Okay. We're just flying through the agenda tonight, guys. This is good. We'll see how we feel at 10:30. Okay, so then we're going to get started with the social and emotional workshop.
Okay. If you focus your attention to the presentation behind you or to your side, I'll let people get where they want to get. Okay, so we are really excited this evening to be providing this workshop on social emotional learning in RSU 5 to you this evening. We do a great deal to help support our students in this area. From the time our students arrive in pre-K, our students are being taught how to work with one another. We believe that all learning that we provide strengthens social and emotional skills. We want our students to acquire and effectively apply the skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, to set and achieve positive goals, to feel and show empathy for others, to establish and maintain positive relationships, and to make responsible decisions. Tonight you will see our proactive focus, pre-K through 12, on social and emotional learning within our schools. To give you a snapshot to show you what happens at the elementary level, we have Paul White, if you would come up as I call your name, a kindergarten teacher at Moore Street School, who is also a certified national trainer for responsive classroom. Lisa Demick, principal at Pownell Elementary School. And finally, Catherine Bigley, a national board certified counselor and school counselor at Pownell Elementary.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Demick, as Cynthia just said. And you're going to actually see this slide twice because I think it just helps to frame the kind of supports that we give our students when it comes to social emotional learning. You may have seen a slide like this before when we talk about academic support for students. And so if you think about that bottom tier as what are the skills and strategies we use with all kids, and then the middle tier as what are the responsive things we do when students need a little bit more? And then at the very top of the triangle, what's the specially designed instruction we give to our students when they show us that they really need that support to access their education? So Paul's going to start with the Tier 1 supports, and Catherine's going to share with you some of the guidance Tier 1 supports that go into Tier 2, and then I'll wrap up with what's available in RSU 5 as far as the Tier 3 supports. Paul.
Good evening, everyone. As Lisa said, I'm going to share a little bit about the pre-K to 5 elementary classroom perspective in looking at social emotional learning and bringing that into our classrooms daily. We have some beliefs as elementary educators. One belief is that we strive to provide a high-quality education each and every day where there is a sense of safety, joyfulness, and fun. Challenging classrooms is what we're looking at and being able to create those environments for our students. We also know that we need to meet students' needs, their needs of belonging, significance, and fun, the fun being the engagement part in learning. We also know that students need to be able to learn both academic and social emotional skills, and that both of these curriculums are equally important. Each strengthens and informs the other. The act of learning involves social risk-taking. And students need to feel emotionally, physically, and socially safe in order to be able to learn. And this allows students to be successful both in school and throughout their lives. We also know that social emotional skills need to be taught and practiced just like any other skill. These skills can be woven into every part of our day, both in social times as well as academic times. And thinking about some of the social emotional skills, we can think about 5 major skills that we focus on: cooperation, assertiveness, responsibility, empathy, and self-control. And thinking about cooperation, we're helping our students to establish and maintain new relationships, resolve conflicts, accept differences, be contributing members of the community, and work productively and collaboratively. With assertiveness, we're helping our students to take initiative, to stand up for ideas without hurting others, to seek help, and to succeed at challenging tasks. With responsibility, we're helping our students to be able to motivate themselves to take action and follow through. They're defining a problem, they're thinking about the consequences and considering those, and then choosing the positive solution. With empathy, we're helping our students to recognize and understand another's state of emotions, appreciating and valuing the differences and diversity, and having concern for others' welfare. And finally, with self-control, we're helping our students to recognize and to regulate their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. This helps them to remain on a successful trajectory throughout their day. One of the practices that we use at the elementary level is the practice of morning meeting. It's a community meeting that starts each day, and this meeting helps to set students up in a proactive way. It also helps to set up the day to be successful for students. The reason that it does that is that, one, it sets a tone of respect and engaged learning right from the start of the day. We're able to help students make connections and enhance those connections among students, as well as students to teachers. We're also able to create a positive power of community where those needs of belonging, significance, and fun are met. And we're able to model and practice social emotional skills. We're also able to then merge social emotional learning along with academic learning. During a morning meeting, students and teachers go through 4 components: a greeting, a share, an activity, and a morning message. A sample greeting might be students learning how to give a friendly handshake, learning how to make eye contact, being able to pass along a smile as they give that greeting, and learning how to give a firm handshake. The ultimate goal is having everyone feel welcomed into that meeting. With the share, a teacher might plan for dialogue shares, where students are going to be learning about how to listen and ask questions. These same skills can then be brought back into the day during a writing workshop lesson in which students are going to need to be listening and then give respectful feedback during a student peer conference. Money Matchup is a game that we could play during activity. In this game, students are receiving a card with a value on it. They're learning how to use kind words as they pass their card off to other peers within that classroom. And when they hear the chime ring, they're able to form some small groups, add up the amount of money that they have on all their cards, and be able to share that information. This same game can then be brought into a math discussion during math later in the afternoon. And then finally, the morning message is a message that is written by the classroom teacher that involves some sort of interaction, whether it be social emotional or academic. A sample morning message that a teacher might leave for their students would be, think of a time you persevered, what happened, and how did it feel? Students can be able to then respond to that question, being able to write down their thoughts on a Post-it note, and being able to put that Post-it note up onto the morning message. As well, they can be ready to share within a partner share or as a whole class. The teacher then can be able to use those same skills about perseverance later in their reading workshop lesson, in which students are going to be learning about using multiple strategies when they come to a word that is challenging. That's a little bit about the elementary classroom perspective, and I'll hand it over for guidance.
So that's my slide right there, but that's okay. Again, my name is Catherine Bigley, and I'm the school counselor at Pownell Elementary School. I grew up in Freeport and went to all the schools K through 12, and so it's really great to be back serving the children in RSU 5. Because of my husband's career, we had to move every 2 to 3 years, and so my experiences as an elementary counselor, a middle school counselor, a high school counselor, an international school counselor, and an independent school counselor, but mostly public. So tonight I'm going to talk about what elementary school counselors do in the district. I'll be representing all the counselors in RSU 5 for elementary, but filtered kind of through the lens of what I do in Pownell. So the first slide is my slide up there. And the elementary years set the foundation for developing the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary for children to become healthy, competent, and confident learners. We want them to come to school, we want them to be happy at school, and have a joyful experience. Elementary children are learning how to be in school and how to be with each other. When children's social and emotional needs are met, they are better able to learn. And school counselors are prepared to support children by giving them tools and strategies to help them, set that down, get back in the classroom and be ready to learn. When I think of my work in schools, I think of two major categories. I think of preventative work and responsive services. So, show me what to do next. Right there. Okay. So I'll first talk about preventative services. So the American School Counseling Association provides a framework for implementing a comprehensive school counseling program. Preventative services are, if you think of the bottom of the triangle, Tier 1. These are services that all children receive, and they're in the form of classroom guidance lessons. The American School Counseling Association guides us in developing our programs, and when deciding what curriculum to use, we always look for evidence-based programs. By going into the classroom regularly, we are able to know every student by name, and we are able to form a relationship with all children. These two are really key because it helps in keeping a mental health pulse on the school, and it makes it easier for children to self-refer or for children to say to me, hey, so-and-so is having a hard time. Mrs. Bigley, can you go talk to him? I did bring some sample lessons. So these are from the Second Step program, which is out of Committee for Children out of Seattle. And there are 4 units in Second Step. So there's skills for learning, empathy, how to handle strong feelings, and problem solving. So this is a lesson in kindergarten on skills for learning. As you can see, we've got Paolo here,
and we've got Samara. And in the previous lesson before this, the children learned how to avoid being distracted by a friend when they're trying to chat with them at carpet time, that circle time or on the carpet. And so they've already learned how to perhaps ignore, and they learned what ignoring is. They've learned how to maybe turn their back a little bit if someone's behind them. And they've also learned to give a quiet signal so as not to interrupt the lesson. So in this lesson, they're now going to learn a new skill by self-talk for staying on task. And self-talk is when you say words in your brain, in your head, in a really quiet voice, or you can say them really quietly so as not to interrupt people. And they love this. We brainstorm we talk about what is Paolo doing? He's on task. What is Samara doing? Well, it looks like she's flying airplanes with her pencil, and so she's not on task. And then we focus on, well, what could Paolo say in his brain to stay on task? He could say focus. He could say ignore Samara. He could say, you keep doing my work. But then the great part is that I model it for them. So I'm going to say, ignore Samara. And I'll say that quietly, and then I'll say it in my brain, and watch me say it in my brain. And they're just like, and then they do it. And so I'm like, all right, now your turn. You say, ignore Samara in your brain. And when you've done that, give me a thumbs up. And they do, and they think that's pretty great. So that's an example of kindergarten. I'm going to take a drink of water. This is second grade in our empathy unit. And this is Estella. And we look at her face and body to try to figure out how she's feeling. And we look at the before picture, and this is the after picture. And we figured out that she's probably feeling a little disappointed, maybe frustrated and sad. And then I tell the story that Estella wants to get better at telling time, and she's having a really hard time with that, so what could she do? And so we brainstorm, well, she could ask her teacher for help. She could use some positive self-talk, and then we decide as a class what she's going to do. She's going to ask the teacher. Well, how is she going to ask the teacher? We're going to pull out our assertiveness skills. And so she asks the teacher assertively for help, and then she practices for a couple weeks, and lo and behold, she is feeling more confident. And so let's take a look at this picture. And how can you tell she's feeling confident? Well, she's smiling. We can see her teeth. Her cheeks are up. And we talk about a time when maybe they had a hard time feeling not very confident with something. And what did they do to get better at it? And then how do they feel now? So those are some examples. Preventative services definitely make an impact on responsive services. And we're doing, in pre-K right now, actually for a few classes, we're doing emotional management. And a parent recently pulled me aside and said, a pre-K parent, and said, we were walking in the parking lot. I picked my daughter up from school, and she fell. And her tears were welling up in her eyes. And I said, I bent over, are you okay? Are you hurt? And she put her hand on her tummy, and she did some diaphragmatic breathing. And she said, I'm good. And they went to the car. So the goal is that we want to give them these skills in a safe environment, and then we want these skills to transfer into real life. That's the goal. Questions about preventative services? Yes.
Do you go into the classrooms on each grade and you that's awesome.
Every week.
I just want to check. Every week?
Every week.
Nice.
And I'm half-time. Another question? No? Okay. So now we'll go to responsive services. Thank you. So responsive services are Tier 2 or Tier 3. They're situations that come up either at school or at home that school counselors respond to. Referrals can come from students, parents, teachers, administration. We have a care team at Pownell. We also have a student assistance team. So they can come from anywhere, really. Elementary counselors do provide short-term individual and group counseling services as well. And we do weekly check-ins with kiddos, maybe lunch bunch. We sometimes provide daily check-ins for students who need extra support. So all these bullets, it was really hard to fit everything on the slide of what we do for responsive services. So I do have a few more, but we'll start with groups. You can kind of read that for yourself. These are different groups that we do. They're usually 6 to 8 weeks in length. And then we also see children who are depressed, anxious, and suicidal, even at the elementary age. In the 13 years that I've been a school counselor, I would say I've probably done 2 inpatient hospitalizations directly from school, not in RSU 5. So it's tough. We provide outside referrals that are really well researched and thoughtful. We provide parenting consults. At this age and stage, it's hard to be a parent. And so we do tips and strategies. We loan out books. And we provide resources, teacher consults, behavior plans. We facilitate crisis interventions and school-wide response plans. We help families access resources, summer camp scholarships, food, a new pair of sneakers. The other things that didn't make it to the slide is that we are attendance monitors because we have children that are reluctant to come to school due to anxiety. We are backpack program facilitators for children who need extra food at home. We are 504 building coordinators. 504 is an accessibility law that helps children with accommodations if you have a mental or physical impairment. And we do all of this by encouraging communication between children and the parents or people that love them the most. Questions about responsive services? No? So our work together. The team of elementary school counselors in RSU 5 is truly exceptional, smart, and dedicated, and I can say that because I've worked in a lot of schools. We are grateful for our newfound time of meetings together. Normally people don't say that, but we really are, because we are singletons in all of our buildings. And so we provide consultations for each other. We share curriculum, we share lessons, we share children's literature. It's great. And we are attempting more data collection this year, and hopefully it'll carry over into next year. But being data-driven helps us inform our practices and helps us prioritize what we need to do. And I have to say that the ratio, the American School Counselor Association has a recommended ratio of 250 students to 1 counselor, and I'm finally in that ratio, and it makes all the difference. I can see children on the days when I'm there, on the days when they self-refer. I can make those parent phone calls. I can send those emails and just make sure that people know what I'm doing with their kiddos and our work together. So it's great. And finally, I think I have the best job in the school district. Do you have any questions for me? Yes.
So when you said you have the 250 student ratio, how does that work out though with you being half-time? I'm assuming that would mean really that's for a full-time counselor?
Full-time. So I have 120 students.
Okay, so you do have the, okay.
And I work Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays from 8:30 to 2:30. So I'm really there 3 days a week, which is great.
Great, thank you.
I have some questions, but I'm holding them for the end because I think they'll be for everyone.
Okay, but I might leave. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I think they might be for Bonnie, probably.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
So you can see all of the work that's done, you know, before kids get to special ed, and to really help to make sure that everyone is getting what they need is really fantastic. We do have a small population in our district that requires specially designed instruction when it comes to social emotional support, children with emotional disabilities or behavioral disabilities. And, you know, we believe that they deserve what they need to get to too. So that's where our special ed social workers come in. They really work closely with our guidance counselors and really help us to make sure that we're proactive and we're not inadvertently reinforcing behaviors, that we're putting strategies in place that support student growth. If students are in need of a multidisciplinary team, or wraparound services, you'll hear at every one of the developmental levels, we have a specially designed program called the Choices program in RSU 5, and that's a on-site day treatment program where we can really make sure that students are getting what they need. Okay, so I'm going to hand it off to Will and Phyllis, and they're going to share with you how this translates at the middle school level.
So if you have any questions, we might leave too. That's a fabulous strategy. I'm going to use it forever. So I guess the theme would continue in as much that, as you heard Lisa and her team saying, that there are certainly specific activities or programs that we utilize, but really the social emotional work happens all day, every day, from when the children are greeted off the bus to when they're playing sports after school or at a social. There's always ongoing kind of coaching and dialogue that is really focused for early adolescents in that sort of social emotional well-being. So Phyllis is going to talk you through some of the things that the grades 6 through 8 teachers and students experience. You'll see this sort of pyramid diagram that's showing you sort of different levels of support that goes along with what Lisa was just sharing with you. It starts at the base, and it's widest at the base because all students are impacted by classroom teachers. In grades 6 through 8, students are in advisories. And then as you see, as the pyramid goes up, there's some specific interventions that occur as children need more either proactive or responsive interventions to get more individualized as it goes up to that sort of smaller percentage of students at the top. So Phyllis?
Thank you. I'm Phyllis Latham, the school counselor at the middle school in Freeport, but I'm also speaking for the middle school portion of Durham as well. One of the things that I think has really helped us is our advisory program. We follow the same program that the elementary was speaking of as the kind of morning format. But what that also allows us to do is do more of that preventative curriculum that's really hard to fit in middle and high school when it's so content-based. So during that time, we can develop lesson plans that we can have the teachers give to the students that have to do with social emotional needs. I go into advisories to do some mindfulness, some work on worry and anxiety. So for me, that's key that we have that time. That's been a great addition. Both schools do different community building activities. We go to Camp Kiev with our 6th graders. Durham goes to the 4-H camp. Same type of focus that we're looking at communication skills, working as teams. We do it in the early part of the year at our school. I'm not sure when to help with that transition to middle school for the kids to get to meet the teachers in a little bit different way outside of the school setting. So those are amazing programs. We follow up in advisory with lots of that curriculum as well. So before we had advisory, that was a little bit trickier to carry that learning. But I feel like with advisory, the team building, the activities happen. You'll see them all over in the hallway doing, Kiev activities that they learned. Like I mentioned before, the mindfulness lesson, I feel like that's been huge. I've actually had students and some parents email me after I've gone in to say, oh, that helps so much. If you have time, there's an amazing TED Talk by Anne-Marie Rossi that's called Mindfulness, Why Aren't We Teaching This?, which I highly recommend. It's about 13 minutes, but we start with that, and it really is helping with emotional regulation. It's really helping with focus. That's a big piece in middle school. Kiddos can struggle with that attention issue. So we're finding some of the mindfulness activities are helping. The other thing that I'm excited about is during this half day, I've been asked to do some lessons with teachers on executive function and the mindfulness. So that's a piece that I think when the teachers are so focused on content, being able to have times like that when we can go in and start teaching them some of these activities, so that a few of them have said to me, oh, I love this. I'm not really comfortable doing it yet. So hopefully in that small group setting, they'll be able to feel comfortable and carry that over into the classroom. We do a lot of work on anxiety and worry. We have a lot of anxious kiddos. I've been in education for 27 years, and I just see it increasing yearly. There's a woman, Lynn Lyons. We follow her work. She's amazing, and really gives you some concrete strategies to use around worry. And so I've actually met with the special ed staff and meeting with the teachers on this as well. So that's a piece. We have a lot of attendance issues that come up around the worry piece. So tackling that is big at the middle school, and I'm sure at the high school level. We do awareness days that some of them might be the alcohol day that the state requires. So we do some education school-wise using advisories, some all-school activities. We're doing a lot on vaping. That's sadly in the news in our schools. So we're doing a lot of all-school education around that, bringing in the teen brain so that the kiddos understand how that all works. We work very closely with Casco Bay Can. They provide great speakers for the community and lots of school-based resources. We also do different kindness activities throughout the school year. A Fab Friday is one that we do where students get to meet kids that maybe they don't see every day from a different grade, get to meet a teacher from a different grade. And then there are also all school kinds of activities that we might do to foster that sense of kindness. We do have 2 other health affiliate therapists. We had one, and the need was so great, we now have another. We have 9 students right now seeing them. And that's an amazing resource for us, where the special ed social workers generally can only work with students who have an IEP or a 504, and they don't do the in-depth type of therapy. Theirs is more school-based. This allows us to refer a family. It's right in school. It cuts down. Kids are so busy. Families are so busy. So that's been a huge, huge help since that's been a part of the RSU. Anything else?
Oh, yeah, you got
Way more? Okay. Where we are taking from Durham the RTIB process, we have a PLC happening right now that guidance is on to really look at those behaviors and setting up some positive support plans for kiddos. We do have an ed tech that has been another huge asset for us, where they can really work with a small group of students that have some issues that are making it so that they're not successful in the classroom. So they might pull them out in a structured study and can really work with them. And we work sort of as a team on developing some plans around that. Different student recognitions assemblies. Durham does this either weekly or monthly, depending on the age of the student. So they're recognizing achievement, but other involvements that the kiddos might have, sharing news, that sense of community type thing. Curriculum units are in our school. Our language arts teachers do a lot of work with nonfiction so that students are reading about social issues, having discussions in small book groups, that type of thing. So it's integrated within the regular classroom setting. We have the school socials, sports, drama club is huge at our school. The ropes courses is out behind us. I know Durham comes over and uses that course as well. So it's carrying over those 4-H and Kiev activities. And then parent education. It is not easy being a middle school parent. So we try to give information at maybe a PTC. We actually just are starting we have books that we lend out, but we actually are starting a bigger lending library that I'm excited about. We do newsletter articles trying to inform parents, example, the vaping, and giving them resources so that they feel like they have what they need to be able to have conversations with their kiddos. We get a lot of that information through Casco Bay Can, which is a substance abuse coalition, if you're not familiar with that.
I think that's
All right,
it.
is that it?
Let's just see.
Any
questions for
questions,
Phyllis?
We've got, I was just going to ask you to elaborate a little bit more on the parent communication piece, just because I recently was in that environment, and I don't. It's possible in my speed reading announcements that I miss some things, but how proactively are you trying to engage parents, especially if you're dealing with things like maybe anxiety or substance use? Maybe it's not kids, who have IEPs that,
Right.
It's like that sort of more subtle stuff.
So I do it through the newsletter, the guidance section of the newsletter. So there have been things from Lynn Lyons, and I'll recommend different books or have a little blurb about some specific part of that. This week's newsletter was on vaping, and some information from Casco Bay Can, and guided you to some websites as parents.
And are you getting much reaction back?
I don't, unless it's a parent calling and we're talking about their specific kiddo. I don't have parents calling and maybe asking more questions about it.
And my questions are not to highlight what I think is a problem at all. I think a lot about all of us, and as a board and as a district, how do we engage parents in general with everything? And I think this is just such a huge need in this day and age.
I would like to, I've had some ideas of looking at technology, like the TED Talks that you can watch and that sort of thing, because it is hard for families to come out. We've had speakers come through Casco Bay Can, and the numbers are not huge, even though the topic's pertinent and terrific. It's just hard. So maybe using some more technology to make it easier for them is one area. Yeah. I don't know if you have more on that.
Add one thing. I think that Phyllis does a lot more with the parent communication than we do, but part of that is also topic related. I think, Maddie, last spring we hosted an event around keeping students safe or keeping children safe via sort of the internet or social media, and that was very well attended from across the community, because while some of these other pieces, if a child is involved in one of these sort of behaviors, there's often very direct involvement with that family who's getting support. And unfortunately for a lot of other parents, they feel like it's important, but it's not impacting them right now. When the topic of something broader like internet safety, for example, or cell phone safety, where I think it's more people feel like that could be impacting my kid any day now or is already, those tend to be more well attended or people are more receptive to it. So it's topic related.
Thanks, Jen. I was just saying that, I understand the rationale that people tend to gravitate to the things that are most pertinent to them, but it's the stuff that they're not aware of as parents that scares me, that what should I be looking for in terms of vaping? I mean, I knew when I was 13, if I came home and I smelled like smoke, I was in trouble, right? So they don't really, I don't know, does it smell? I don't know. No. Maybe your newsletter would tell me.
It would.
So I think that's exactly, Michelle, what Phyllis is alluding to in terms of those are some of the topics that we're trying to figure out. How do we communicate that in what medium, so that it's not sort of buried in a newsletter where some other things are more pertinent, but it's also not part of the sort of daily deluge of emails. So there are definitely some newer topics, that being one, that we're having to figure out ways to communicate that to parents of middle schoolers. Any other questions on middle school?
So the health affiliates therapist, is that specific to FMS or is that available to all the kids?
So at Durham we have a day and a half of that support also, but that is accessed K through 8.
And Mass Landing has, I'm not sure if it's through health affiliates, but it's a outside therapist that they offer space to at the school.
Okay, so basically the same availability to kids.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. High school? I'm not sure who's doing high school. Jen?
Good evening, I'm Dana Clark. I'm the department head of the guidance department here at Freeport High School, and here is our pyramid of support. So at the bottom of the pyramid in that more general, broad area is advisory. So all of our students have the same advisor for all 4 years, and they have advisory daily, 5 times a week, and one day they aren't able to be called back by teachers for a reassessment or anything like that. So there is one day dedicated to some kind of advisory activity. And sometimes those are school-wide. We may have a speaker, or it may be a student recognition, or it may be a guidance lesson, something along those lines. And other times it's things that the advisors are doing individually with their students. And then from there, we go up to our guidance counselors. So our students also have the same school counselors for all 4 years. So we carry students from 9th through 12th grade. There are 3 of us, and we are well below the ratio. We are under 250 students apiece, but we also do 3 different kind of genres of stuff. So we do social emotional, we do the career piece, and then we also do the academic piece. From there, we have a wonderful school nurse who actually sees a lot of our students for a variety of things. And recently, we've actually been talking about how many belly aches she sees, the anxiety belly aches, oftentimes, but for other things. So she's seen a lot of those around midterms, spirit days. Mysteriously, everyone has a bellyache right around 11 o'clock. So we're lucky to have a full-time school nurse here. And then we also have a wonderful mentor program. We have 2 different mentor programs. One is our freshman mentors, and our freshman mentor program has been around for a long time. Every 9th grade student is paired with a mentor, and each mentor has a couple of students, so it's not necessarily just pure one-to-one, but they welcome them on the first day of school, which is freshman only, and then they also connect with them throughout the year, and once a month they do a mentor activity. So like around Halloween, they actually trick-or-treated around the building. They'll be doing something to celebrate Kindness Week / Valentine's Day coming up in February, and they do other things like that. Those mentors make sure those students have a nice transition to high school, and then also, that they know where to go. It's an upperclassman traditionally, an 11th or 12th grader, and so that's also helpful, just to have a friendly face that kind of knows their way around, and they don't have to worry about stuffing in a locker or something like that. Not that happens here, because it doesn't ever, but it's amazing what 8th graders think happens in this building. So then we also have some wonderful wellness activities that we've been offering this year. We have a brand new Zen room, and I will show you some pictures, and many of you may have already seen it. But we do have a space where students can relax. Sometimes we offer meditation. We have yoga on Fridays. We've had rock painting, some therapeutic coloring, things like that. And I'll talk about our wellness goal in just a little bit. We have a Seeds Navigate program. So that's a little bit more of an intensive mentor program. That is one-to-one. It's 11th and 12th graders who are mentoring traditionally at-risk students is the students that are part of that group. They have an adult leader, but really it's the upperclassmen mentors that lead the groups. They meet once a week. It's all confidential. It's actually run by Seeds of Independence, so it's separate from Freeport High School, which is actually kind of a benefit because it kind of helps students feel a little more at ease about sharing some of those things, knowing that it doesn't necessarily even come to a school counselor. They really only come to us if there's a concern about safety. We have a natural helpers program that started last year for students to be able to be kind of that first line of defense. Sometimes students feel more comfortable talking to another student before they can reach out to an adult. And sometimes they are problems that students can help with versus needing to always to come to us right away. We have a student assistance team where we have students that are identified with traditionally academic concerns that are maybe beyond what classroom teachers are able, or maybe they've run out of ideas, or we're seeing a pattern where students aren't successful. And so they're identified, and then we make an individualized plan for them. That's a group of teachers and then also an administrator and our social worker who help come up with a plan for students to find more success. We have a wonderful dropout prevention committee where it's a group of both community members, we have a school board member, our administrators, also from the middle school as well, to look at what the patterns have been of our students who haven't been successful and how we can help everyone reach graduation. We have a new alternative program. Holy cow, we have a lot of new stuff. We've been doing a lot. We have our Endeavor program. It's in its second year. It's an alternative pathway for education. It's currently for just 11th grade students, but we're hoping to expand that to reach other students as well. And it is an afternoon program at this point where students are in that program just the second 2 periods of the day, and they access science, math, and English, and they're able to take an alternative approach to those. Oftentimes, those students have been at risk. They haven't been successful in the traditional classroom, and this is an opportunity to do some hands-on, outside-the-box kind of stuff. We have a phenomenal school social worker, so if all of that doesn't work, Then we're reaching out to Marguerite, and actually oftentimes we're reaching out to Marguerite before that too. But so those students that are higher need, maybe it's more of a systemic issue, maybe it's with the whole family, often the times those will go to our school social worker, who is half special ed, half general ed. And then we do contract out with Day One, and we have a substance abuse counselor who comes in 2 days a week. She comes on Mondays and Fridays. And then, after all that, we also have special events and programs that we do. We've done some social media safety, the Choices Matter program. We also had Linda Dutiel come in, and she did a school-wide assembly. That was back in November, and that was connected to Challenge Day. And for those of you who haven't participated in Challenge Day or haven't heard about Challenge Day, we've done it for the last 4 years, and it is I don't want to say team building, but it's a program meant to connect our students together, and we've done it for our 9th grade class. So every class in our building right now has all been through the Challenge Day experience, the majority of them anyway. And it really promotes respect, empathy, and community building. And I've actually received a significant amount of positive feedback from our 9th graders that I've been meeting with recently, that they appreciated the opportunity to get to know their peers just a little bit better and kind of see the other side. And our wellness goal. So we have this wonderful Zen room that was grant funded, and it's located just next to the teacher's room in the older part of the building, near the nurse's office. And so we have a space where we can do yoga with 8 to 9 students. And our guidance department decided that for our goal for this year, we wanted to be able to offer at least 3 different experiences for students a week. So it's a hefty goal, but our Choices class, they've been using it almost daily, which is wonderful. We've been sending out different wellness tips around the holidays. We sent out some, don't get too stressed out just because it's Christmas. And we had some around midterms, just keep breathing. And then we've got some coming up, so be looking for those, for how to beat those winter blahs. So we actually have heard some really positive feedback about the emails, and we've heard that some of our students have actually tapped into our YouTube channel to check out the meditations and just enjoy some of that stuff too. So that's been great to think outside the box a little bit. And then our athletic department, Craig Sickles sends out the athlete tip of the week weekly, and those are sleep, nutrition, substance use, stress. So there's a little bit of overlap too with some of our wellness tips that we send out as well. This is the meditation room, in case you haven't seen it. There's a fountain, it's lovely. And then those were our students who are painting rocks. So if you go in there at any given time, there's actually a ton of them lined up on a chalkboard in there, and they're wonderful. And the Wellness Club actually sold them at our Makers Fair, and they did quite well. And we're going to start a new twist to it, which is a make one, take one. So students can leave some of them behind, but then they can also leave one that they've made, so we can kind of share a little inspiration.
Hi, everyone. Jen Gulko, principal of the high school. I'm going to pass out a larger version of one of the slides because it was tiny. So I'm just going to talk a little bit more, some of the details about our staff that students are able to access in the building. Dana, do you mind? Oh, no. Thanks. So as Dana mentioned, the nationally recommended caseload number for guidance counselors is about 250 students per counselor. And you can see that right now, as of yesterday, we had 575 students at the high school, and that's about 192 students per counselor. So we are well below that recommended level, as we shared with the board last year. Our social worker, as Dana said, supports both our special education students and school-wide. She provides school-wide support for general education students. Some special education students have it as a part of their IEP that they have social work services, and they're required a set amount of time each week, or it might be bi-weekly, might be more than once a week, that they see our social worker. Our school nurse, she is fantastic. Not only does she see tons of kids, she does a lot of collaboration with our guidance department and our social worker. So if we have an incident of self-harm, our school nurse is often involved. If we have a student that we are feeling needs to be evaluated for higher need than we can provide, then in terms of a mental health situation, our nurse is involved in that too. One of the things that we're working on this year, I know I've said to the board a few times that the benefits of the additional hours that we have for professional development in the school, with the added 18 hours after school this year, it has allowed us to focus on some things in faculty meetings that we just have not had time to do. And so our November, December, part of January and part of February faculty meetings, we're trying to build awareness with all of our faculty about our student population and their needs, sharing information such as how many of our students are on free and reduced lunch, what does that actually mean of what their family income is. We shared some situations that were without student names attached to it, of some of the things that our students face. And then our faculty has been working on brainstorming what are some supports that we can put in school-wide, and then how can we also build connections with all of our students. I think we are a school that prides ourselves on relationships with students, but some students still identify not having a strong relationship with an adult, and our goal would be that all of our students would be able to name at least one adult that they feel a strong connection with. So we've been doing a lot of work. Our faculty's been putting a lot of energy into that. We get feedback from faculty at the end of every faculty meeting, and they have said multiple times that they want to make sure we continue this conversation about how to meet student needs. And then the outside support, as Dana said, we contract with a substance abuse counselor. Right now, one of the things we've actually talked about in the faculty meeting is our substance abuse counselor is worried that we are not sending her enough students. She's only working with 4 students right now, and she's here 2 days a week. And one of the suggestions from faculty was to increase the amount of information that students have about how you access the substance abuse counselor. I think that's an area of growth for us, because it's highly confidential who sees and works with the substance abuse counselor. But I also think we could do a better job of letting our students know that we have that support available. And then Casco Bay Can, as Phyllis was explaining, is just a fantastic organization. Marguerite, our social worker, collaborates with their board. But we do multiple things with Casco Bay Can. We refer students to a program that's called SERP, which is a program that's a weekend long, 2 days, and it's all about choices that students make. So sometimes when students have a discipline issue that potentially involves substance abuse, or is someone that we think is making risky choices, the Charlie Mellon and I, or our guidance department or social worker, can refer kids to participate in their weekend program. The other, one of the questions from the board was about parent collaboration. We hold events called table talks, where some people from Casco Bay Can come in. And so far what we've done is picked substance abuse every time. That's often what parents want to know about. So we started those 3 years ago, and we've done one. The most recent one was on vaping, and then we think that we have another one that's coming up in March, and that we're going to do vaping again, just because it's such a difficult topic, I think, for parents to even keep up with. And so we don't have huge attendance, but we've had between 10 and 15 families come to those events. And then we also, Casco Bay Can collaborates to send out those athlete tips of the week, often the ones that Craig sent out. And those go to all students, not just to athletes. They're just called the athlete tip of the week. But Casco Bay Can is often the ones behind sharing that information out. So we've been really, really lucky to work with them, and they've been a fantastic resource. At all of our parent conferences, open house, Casco Bay Can gives us a table of resources that we put out that parents can take to, about all sorts of topics usually related to substance use and abuse and prevention. So one other thing that was a question that came from the board was about support services at our school versus other schools that are nearby. So one of the things that I did was some research about the schools that are in our cohort. That's the chart that you have in front of you. So something to notice is how it's a balance between guidance counselors and social workers. Also, the number of, if you see on the chart, the one thing that's not represented on the chart is the number of students identified as special ed in each school. That's probably one piece of data that I could add to this. For example, at Mount Ararat, you'll see that they have 3 full-time special ed students, and I put there, that's because they have a significantly high number of students, 120, who are identified as special education and have an IEP. So you can see that in comparison, our load for a caseload for guidance counselors is low. One other thing to note on here, though, is that at Falmouth and Cape, they do have a college counselor. That college counselor works in addition to their, according to their principals, works in addition to their guidance counselors when they're seeing students. So. So you can see kind of the breakdown of how much support there is for students when we're talking about social emotional support. And generally, the guidance counselors in all of those schools work with that college piece, the academic piece, and the social emotional piece. You can see that support for substance abuse varies from school to school. So some have that as part of their social work services that they already offer, meaning that their social worker is licensed in the area of substance counseling. And then some schools similar to us are contracting out services. Mount Ararat was the only one that unfortunately is not offering substance abuse counseling right now. And that, I think, leads us to questions. I think it's questions for us and questions for everyone.
Pre-questions that were already.
Pre-question.
Yeah. Do you want to ask? Okay, you go first
Okay.
with your particulars. And then
Thank you so much. I'm especially excited about what you shared about working with the teachers so that they're more aware of what they're dealing with every day in terms of what these kids are facing every day, and that gives me goosebumps. That's so very excited. This wasn't fair because this wasn't sent ahead of time. It's not a really pointed question, but I just didn't hear mention in the high school. I'm curious about the middle school as well, but I didn't hear mention of creating a culture of inclusion and respect for kids who identify differently than the norm. And I'm just wondering if there's any sort of awareness around that as an issue. Anything I hear is anecdotal, but what I have heard, some of the things I have heard have given me pause. And of course, I know kids can be cruel, but is there any work around inclusion, respect, and tolerance among kids?
Yeah, I think that the place where I would say, Dana mentioned one thing is an advisory that we're doing, certain activities, and this week happens to be Kindness Week. And so tomorrow, I don't know if kids know this, but they will in the morning, is called Mix It Up Day that lots of schools do at different grade levels. We change it a little bit at a high school level because Mix It Up Day is a national thing where it's really promoting kids getting out of their own circle of friends and trying to reach out and include others. And so you do some kind of goofy things that we're going to do this thing at lunch tomorrow that's just trying to get kids up and out and even talking to kids that they don't normally associate with or eat with, things like that. So there's some kind of school-wide efforts, but I would say where you would see it the most in the high school would be in our clubs. So we have RSVP, which is Reducing Violence, Sexism. I think that's what it stands for. Yes, yes, thank you. Reducing Sexism Violence Program. We have our GSTA, which supports our gay, straight, trans students. And then we have our civil rights group that has not been as strong this year, but they are making a comeback. They just met last week. And so talking about the rights of all students and people. And so you see them participate in different activities. I think it's always something that we are working on. And then Liz Pierce has, our other guidance counselor, one of our other guidance counselors has started a wellness club. And with the wellness club, they've kind of attached to kindness and acceptance. And so they have a couple of activities that are planned for the whole school this year. So we're constantly working on it. I think, it's important to us, Charlie and I, at every assembly. The kids are so tired of us here talking about respect, but we just keep talking about respect and, the importance of that. And I think we try to model it, talk about it, and continue to promote kids being respectful.
So I have a comment and then a question. So the comment is that when you talked about building relationships here at the high school, I just think it's so obvious that that's something that you guys try to do. I mean, it's amazing to me that, you have kids that when they're in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, they come home and they talk about how they love their teacher. And sometimes that really wanes when you get to like middle school and high school. And, I have 2 in high school right now here, and they come home and they talk about their teachers and just talk about like fun conversations they have with them, a card game they learned at advisory. And it's those little things I really think make a huge difference. And I'm really happy to see that that's a big focus here. So that's the comment. My question is, with substance abuse support, with the part-time person that you have, when you said about, only 4 students are accessing it right now, and I wondered if that's something that, I have 2 questions. One, that if parents can access that, if they feel that they have some issues at home, maybe with their own child, excuse me, or if kids can access that service if they feel like they're in a home that has substance abuse issues, not their own, but they have a parent that has issues with substance abuse, because I think that's really prevalent now as well, that even if a kid isn't struggling themselves, they're living it. So I just wanted to know what services, if those are anything that person is available to.
Marguerite, our social worker's here, so I'm going to have Marguerite answer that question and say thank you for your first comment about the relationships and your first. The question about the parent, I'm sorry, the question before, but before that you had another portion to your question.
And if parents can access if they worry about one of their children or their kids, or if kids can access if they worry about substance use in the home.
Okay, great. You want to answer?
You have to come. Sorry. Okay. Hi. Students can access if they are affected by substance use. Yes, they can still access. The issue that gets a little tricky sometimes is confidentiality. So if you have a parent who has good communication with their child and they sit down and say, yeah, I think you might need some help with this, and the kid says, yeah, Mom, I think you're right. Let's go talk to this individual. That's one way you can do it. A number of our kids who meet with her, the families don't know, which is somewhat of a mystery too, because once it hits your insurance, I'm kind of wondering how that all works, but there's such strict confidentiality around substance, it's much different even than mental health counseling. But I think that's a really good point, and that's something that we should maybe try to market as we're trying to fill up her open spots. To be able to say, you don't necessarily have to have a problem, but if someone you're close to does, you could access her. So that's a really good point.
Thank you.
Kate.
I have a question about, I just made a list here of what seems to be offered across all the schools, and one of the things I'm not seeing in the high school pyramid would be RTIB, EdTechs, and Choices program, and wondering how those kids who are accessing those in middle school, what is the equivalent service at the high school that's being offered to accommodate them?
So that's just an oversight. We have an outstanding Choices program and teacher here. We're actually doing more collaborating between our life skills, which is called Bridges at the high school, Bridges and Choices. So there's sometimes where they're integrated for classes, but the Choices program has 3 full-time ed techs that work with them, as well as our full-time Choices teacher, who is just a magician with students. He's unbelievable. And then and the Bridges program, the life skills program, also has 3 dedicated ed techs. And so they've done a really good, those two, when I first got here 4 years ago, those 2 programs were very, very separate, and now they're very integrated. So for example, they all take science first period together. There's 19 of them with almost all the ed techs and the teachers that are there, and pulling groups out when they need to. But so they've got a great amount of support there. Our RTI process for regular ed students who are not on a 504 or not on an IEP, that's part of that work is part of what the SAT team does. And so some of that is addressed in other ways, but I think it's an area of growth for us, for sure, of what are some of the classroom interventions that are happening at a tier 1 level. But the SAT process, Charlie leads that process, and there are steps that a teacher has to take before they refer a student to the SAT team. So they have to have, they have basically a checklist of things that they need to try to do interventions in the classroom first before they're then pushed up to the SAT team.
And Jen, could you talk about how you have a couple of ed techs that do support kids who are struggling? I know it's mostly academic, but that kind of weaves into it too. I think the social emotional.
Definitely. So we have a ed tech who works part of the time in the library, and then she runs what we call our learning lab class. And so our learning lab class is just a super small structured study hall. And usually those are kids who not only do they need academic support, they need just stronger connections with adults. So we don't put more than 12 kids in that supported study hall. And then we also, unfortunately, last year, she left to go to medical school, but we had a part-time ed tech who was just outstanding. And we we're really excited. She starts tomorrow, have found another part-time ed tech, and we call that Operation Graduation. And that person, that's one of the things that she's going to do is just, kind of really intensive support for one-on-one for our seniors who are on the dropout dropout warning list, as well as some of our younger students who need some of that individual attention. And so some of it is academic support, but a lot of it is really, just kind of supporting that whole student.
So one of the questions that I think was sent ahead of time, and it was sent to all the different levels, but I think particularly it comes down into the high school, is sort of the anecdotal comment that we've seen increases in number of kids dealing with social and emotional issues. I think Phyllis mentioned that as it related to anxiety. Are we seeing an increase? If so, is it something we track in terms of statistics? Can we see a rate of growth? How are we dealing with that, the increased demand?
So one of the things that we are trying to do this year is to start collecting data. We have not collected data on that, really tight data on who are we seeing and why are we seeing these students. I think that's going to paint a better picture for us about, where is the highest need. I think in general, we see anxiety from students in high school. I think social media by, far and away has not helped with levels of anxiety amongst students. I think the college process plays a part into that, lots of different factors. And so that is something that we're working on this year, to have concrete data to see what is our highest, kind of category of need that we're seeing, both with guidance counselors and social workers, because we have not tracked it in the past.
Yeah. So the other thing that I think is important to hear too is sometimes it's not about the quantity, it's the severity. And so I don't know that I necessarily always see, more kids coming in, but the stuff is bigger, or it's on a grander level, and the kids aren't coming to school. I mean, they haven't been coming to school for weeks, and their anxiety is so bad that, or whatever the issue may be, where before you would be able to triage and you might even actually see more kids, but these other things are just, they take up so much time and they're so intense, and it requires so many supports to build them back up and get them back in the building. So I think that over the 8 years that I have been in the guidance department here, it's more the intensity. I mean, the numbers are certainly higher, but also the severity of what's been going on has also contributed to the need for more support, too.
And I think Bonnie and Cynthia were going to also speak to that question.
Thank you both for partially answering that question. You've taken care of some of it. So we heard Catherine, who left, say earlier that
She wasn't kidding.
she's gone, yeah. That, she sees more because she's had lots of experience in different places, and she sees more. And I think Dana just did a great job explaining, maybe there's more, but it feels like even that much more because of the intensity and severity of what we're seeing. So that's one of the reasons why we would continue to increase the amount of social emotional support. Over the past 4 years, we've added the equivalent of 1.4 positions to the social work, and we've added 2 RTIB ed techs, and are requesting 3 more in this budget, as well as 0.3 nursing this year, which we've seen in these pyramids all have impact. And I think Bonnie has a few more things to add.
Yeah. I would say that we really don't have the data. I agree with that. I also do agree with Dana that, we have more students coming into our district, and I'm thinking of, some of our K-2 students as well, so it's the numbers as well as the intensity. So every year when we look at the needs of our classrooms, and, I look at the needs that we have for students that have, emotional dysregulation. A couple years ago, we redesigned the Choices Classroom in Durham and really made it like a day treatment classroom. At that time, this was like in 2016-17, we had one social worker shared between Durham Community School, 0.6, and Pownell, 0.4. So when we redesigned the program, we actually placed a full-time social worker in the Durham Community School, and then we added, in the budget, a position for 0.4 for Pownell. And the reason for that is because in our Choices classrooms, especially in K-8, it's really important for a social worker who really does have the background in mental health to support the staff in the day treatment classrooms, because, it's one thing to provide and to be trained to provide academic instruction. It's really different when you have students that have mental health needs as well as needing academic instruction. So they really work with the ed techs in the program as well as the teacher to, really provide a cohesive program that looks at behavior as well as academics. We did the same thing last year at Moore Street. We had a half-time social worker shared between Moore Street and Mass Landing. And we ended up, because of the number of students that entered the district, we ended up this year adding a half-time social worker in special ed. So now we have a full-time social worker shared between Moore Street and Mass Landing. Again, that social worker really supports the students that are in, it's not like a Choices classroom, but there are students with significant behaviors, and she works with the teacher and the ed techs to support them. The other thing that Moore Street and Mass Landing did is they actually requested last year, and it was supported by the school board, and a half-time regular ed social worker was hired, and that person supports students that are not identified, as well as serves on the SAT team to help the teachers create support plans for those students that are in general ed classrooms. So every year we look at our programs and we look at our student needs, and we look at, what do we need to provide our students so they can be successful here. And so, every year we've increased, the social work support, K-8. When students get into the high school, Jen mentioned that we have an outstanding teacher in our choices classroom as well as functional life skills. And there isn't as much of a need to do positive support because there's so many resources at the high school, and the teachers are able to develop relationships with students. And at that point, when students get into high school, they also have some skills because they've been getting support throughout their school years and are able to, call on their compensation strategies more so than when they're in K-8. So that's what we're doing to support our students in special ed. Any questions about that?
Thank you. Thank you. I think you picked up on a lot of the questions.
Did I answer them all? No.
Oh, she has more?
No, she has more.
We're teaming together.
But wait, there's more. Okay.
These are just in response to some of the questions that were emailed ahead of time. So, and Michelle started us off with our second question. So the first one was, could the administrators discuss their approach to discipline? And I'm going to take a stab at this, but I would invite any of the administrators to add to it if I don't hit exactly what they actually do. So I think I'm going to try to speak for all of them that, the consequences are really meant to be teachable moments and not just start off with the punitive part. Sometimes that piece is there, but consequences are, an opportunity for an educational moment to go back to strategies that they may have learned and forgotten, to do some restorative practice work with the students, and sometimes there's a paired consequence, but the real thing is, how do you get the behaviors to stop? It's not about the discipline as we think of it. Would any of the principals like to add to that, or have? No? Okay. Any questions about that piece? A thumbs up? Okay. Kate has a question.
I don't have a question, but I guess I would add, as a parent from experience.
We've all been there.
At least at the elementary level, that I find that the administrators are also reaching out to the parent and engaging them for supports.
Great. Nice addition. Thank you. The third we just answered the second question. So the third question we have to answer today is, if numbers have gone up, how have guidance counselors and social workers been coping with the increased loads? I feel like we've addressed that. Is there anything more specific that you'd like on that, or did you have anything to add to that? No.
No, I think I actually answered.
Okay. All right, very good, because we talked about the 0.25 social workers at each of the schools. Yeah. The fourth one is,
Can I ask one question on that, more specific, because I think, and maybe you'll do it later, but it really ties in with that exact question specific to the high school. If we're seeing more social, emotional issues at the high school, are the guidance counselors, triaging those? It sounds like they're increasing in severity. If they are, how are they meeting the other two legs of their stool? And if it's going to the social worker, are their caseloads increasing?
Okay. And I don't know if Dana, do you want to respond to that? Okay.
So the reality is that yeah, we are triaging. We're triaging a lot, and that was actually some of the data that we kind of pulled together, was to see just how many students over, at least that we could remember from the beginning of this year, that may have been moved on to social work. But we also understand that her load is also, her plate is quite full as well. And so it was close to 60 students that were social work referable, perhaps, but then we ended up seeing on our own and taking care of on our own. And it does mean that some of the other stuff doesn't happen. You may not see as much of we may not get to have some of the college conversations we wanted to have, or maybe some of the more, I would say probably more of those career development pieces. We may have to put off doing a freshman meeting or a sophomore meeting because we are dealing with more of the social emotional piece. So sometimes something has to go, and because our students are always first, it's some of those other pieces that may not get as much attention.
Thank you. Okay. We'll move on to number 4. What percentage of students who exhibit behavioral challenges also struggle with social emotional issues? We believe that is 100%. Did you want to add anything to that, Bonnie?
No, after talking with Cynthia this week about how do you make that distinction, and I'm not really sure you can. I think in terms of what the behaviors look like, that changes as students move from kindergarten to elementary to middle school. But it's all related to their emotional regulation, and for some students that have difficulty with social skills, it just makes it difficult, and so you see behaviors as a result. So it's hard to say what came first, really. They're all, there's such an overlap.
Okay. The next question is, what percentage of students accessing social and emotional supports also qualify for free and reduced lunch? That's really confidential information. So I'm just going to move on to the next. Number 6 is, how long is the wait for students who qualify for main care to access counseling outside of the school? And Bonnie and I talked this out today, and she's going to respond to that.
Okay. So that's really kind of hard to gauge. But if you look at what's happening politically in our state, when LePage was the governor, I think we all read in the news that he wasn't in favor of, some people having main care. So he restricted that. And therefore, many children and families and single individuals who had qualified previously for main care didn't meet the criteria because they were changed. There was also a reduction in the funding for main care. So I think overall, it took families a longer time to, access main care. And, the funds were not available either. And so that impacted not just eligibility, but even for those children that qualified, because the payment to the counselors were not, they weren't paid in a timely fashion. Many of them actually, I know some agencies who just completely closed because they couldn't afford to stay, in business. That being said, we're in a new era now, and Janet Mills has, I think you've read this, she's expanded main care considerably. And many people have already applied. And some programs that had not been funded and some families who did not meet eligibility, I would expect, and I'm really optimistic, that it shouldn't take as long. And hopefully the services will, grow as we move forward. So although we don't know how long it takes, we can only base it on, politically, is the administration in our state in favor of this or, not? And at this point, I think we're going to see some change in main care eligibility and the services that are available for families. Yep.
It also concerns me, I think, that the shortage of behavioral health care professionals we have in the state, so that even if they are eligible for main care, that students may be on a wait list that could be 6 months just to be evaluated, and then after they're evaluated, then they're on a wait list to get services. So I'm kind of wondering, how in touch we might be with parents about, I have a child who is waiting for services and not being treated.
Yep, I think that's the reality. I think the payment for the people that are providing in-home behavioral support is low. And I think we're asking a lot of them when we're asking them to provide in-home services. Is that what you're referring to? And they're not readily available.
Yeah, so services outside of school where we might have a student in school with needs, and then so you might assume, okay, that student has been, trying to access services outside of school, but then they're not getting anything.
That's correct.
So kind of, are we in touch with parents about, knowing then, I don't know, what is the district we do about that to support that child who really needs more support out of school? What can we do in school?
Well, what we've been doing is working more closely with parents. But there's a huge role for advocacy there, because if the service isn't there, and that's really the reality that I'm hearing from parents, their child may qualify for main care and home-based services, but if they're not trained individuals to do it, that presents as a hardship for the family. And so we try as much as we can to help them, but locating that service is really difficult. So that being said, again, our universities, I know the University of Southern Maine has a program where, a person can get like a master's level degree in, I think it's called behavioral analysis. And, with that program, there have been many more board-certified behavior analysts available. I remember just maybe 5 or 6 years ago, it was hard to find a BCBA. And now, we have a contract with a person who's been helpful to our staff. And I think these are the people training, the in-home providers to do a good job in the home. So I think with the university, having this master's program has been, I think over time, the numbers have increased, but I think it's going to increase even more so. So that's good. That's a good sign.
And I would imagine that if we have a kid that's potentially main care eligible, we're not saying, okay, well, now go to main care, we're done. You can get your services elsewhere. If, to your point, they may not see those services for 6 months to a year. I mean, I presume we're still continuing to do what we can with our staff.
Oh, of course. Yes, we always do. We always provide the services in the school. I think the hardship, and that's what you're referring to, is that the families don't have these services in their homes. Right. And that's difficult. That's challenging. Yeah.
Okay, and the last question that we were emailed is, do teachers participate in professional development around social emotional learning? And I think you heard a couple of good examples this evening. Phyllis mentioned that she provided some executive functioning training. She talked about the Lori Lyons workshop with the special ed staff. Jen shared what they've done with their extra time during their staff meetings about being aware of who are our students that are sitting in front of us every day, and how can we support them. And then we also provide suicide prevention training to all of our staff. That's a required training. I think we're going to segue to you.
And also Paul White, did you mention that he is a trainer of responsive classroom and has trained many of our staff, so we're really fortunate to have him in our district.
And the principals are really good about asking for that professional development. So sometimes we've had hosted the training here. And so Paul White is our national board certified trainer. And so we've requested him for, I don't know if you've accepted yet for this summer. Yes, he has. Okay. So we're providing that.
Not to put you on the spot or anything.
We're providing that this summer. And I've already talked to them nationally. And I said, we have somebody in-house. And she goes, oh, you must mean Paul White. But I didn't actually, so now I have the confirmation. Last year, we did something a little bit different because we had a fewer staff that needed to be trained. So we actually contracted with Cape Elizabeth was hosting a training. And so we sent several teachers, I think 6 teachers there. So we're constantly trying to ensure that anybody that onboards or hasn't had it that is already on board, that we get them that training. That's a 4-day intensive training. And I think Paul did a great job explaining that. So sorry, I forgot to mention that one.
So I just also wanted to mention that we also have our social workers go to conferences, around the area. I know that some of our social workers have attended the Sarah Ward workshop, which is usually offered at the Harris Kit, and she's a really wonderful presenter. and offers a lot of different interventions for students that have executive functioning deficits. And the social workers go back to their buildings and talk to staff about it. And they also share the information at special ed staff meetings. And I did want to also mention, and Phyllis mentioned it in her presentation, that she went to the Lynn Lyons workshop, which was fabulous. And I asked her to present to the special ed staff at one of our meetings. She created a wonderful PowerPoint and did an excellent job. And she also presented to our nurse group just a lot of different strategies for helping our students that have anxiety. And then more recently, one of our social workers went to a trauma-based workshop, and she's going to be presenting to our staff in March on some interventions for students that have experienced trauma in their lives. So we do provide a lot of ongoing PD. And, the expectation is they come back and they share it with their colleagues, and, they sit on SATs and they help make recommendations based on, student needs and interventions that are, effective. So that's an ongoing process.
Wow, yeah.
So I also was wondering about professional development for teachers and I'm sure as they're doing all these other things, which sound amazing, perhaps they're self-reflecting and taking what they're teaching the students or using with their students with themselves. But I was also wondering about professional development for teachers, because teaching is such a demanding job for the teacher's own social, emotional health.
Mm-hmm. And what are we doing with that? Yeah. Okay. I'm speaking on behalf of the special ed teachers. Maybe the principals could speak about professional development for general ed teachers. Is that what you're referring to?
For wellness, maybe?
For wellness, or social mindfulness or social emotional support for teachers.
Well, they're all racing to the mic for that one.
Yeah.
It varies, so we'll give you a couple of examples. And here comes Ray.
And here's Ray.
I think it absolutely varies at the level and what you have in your building, but Phyllis is an incredible resource for us. I think part of, when she says she goes into advisory and works with the kids, she came into my advisory, and not only did she work with the kids, she taught me some skills that I can turn around and use and do different things. Then I look at that carry on over, something I use, with kids that come down to the office, kids that, in advisory. Coach Strong and I used it on the soccer field as well with kids. So, it really does transfer all over everywhere. Friday's professional development time. The teachers have choices between about 8 different activities they're doing, one of which is Phyllis, which we have a number of people signed up for mindful activity. Mindless. See, I need to go to that one very clearly. Mindful activities. Yeah.
You better sit in the front row for that one,
Exactly.
Yeah. He's just leaving.
Go home.
No more questions.
This is similar to what Ray expressed, but I know Jen just mentioned that they do this at the high school. We do it at Mass Standing as well, that once a month we have staff-led wellness. So we have a yoga instructor on staff. Our art teacher has done artwork with staff. We've gone snowshoeing, played volleyball, just stuff to prioritize. There's the importance of prioritizing wellness, do Zumba together. And then we've also had some conversations with to get our special ed social worker and our regular ed social worker to collaborate to do some staff training around mental health self-care, but it hasn't happened yet.
So just so I understand the numbers, so Pownell has a half-time a guidance counselor. The Freeport High School has 3. Durham has 1. Freeport Middle School has 1 full-time. And then do Moore Street and Mass Landing share 1, or do they have a...
We share a special ed one, and then we share a...
Would you go to the mic?
For guidance.
We each have a full-time guidance counselor.
Okay. So my question, I guess, is for Will. So it seems that you would be the only one well above the 250 to 1. I mean, Lexi's amazing, but how is she doing it all for 10 grades?
Could you go to the mic?
You just need a recording. Just push the button.
Well, the answer would be it's a challenge. And, but, so yes, she works incredibly hard at it. And the range is sort of adds to that a little bit, because on one end, you're welcoming families in through pre-K and K screening process and getting them into school. And on the other end, you're also trying to support parents with high school placement and classes and preparing students at that side of things. And that also sort of crosses over, because as you've heard, the range of sort of skills. So she will do a lot of the in-class support with the primary children, actually right through 6th grade. Currently, she's doing a whole focus on yoga and sort of mindfulness. A practice probably came out after seeing Ray. With 5th grade, but then there are just different, oftentimes when you get up into the more the early adolescence grades, some of that work then happens on an individual level. So it's a stretch is the answer.
Okay.
Thank you. Really appreciate the time and the thought that went into the workshop and answering all the questions that came ahead of time. And I also want to plug Lynn Lyons for anyone watching at home or any of us. I went to see her, 2-3 years ago, and she really opened my eyes. Having a kid who we discovered had anxiety, and I never took it seriously, and now I understand it way differently than I ever did before. And she can sign up for her newsletter, find her online, read her book. I highly recommend it. In Valley's questions that she sent all of us, she asked us to consider a big question, which is, how do we want to be as a district? Do we want to proactively address social and emotional wellness and concerns, or do we want to be in crisis management mode? And I am grateful that we have continually passed a budget that is growing our supports. But I just wonder if we're doing enough. And I don't know what level of staffing would be required for us to be proactive. And it sounds like from what we've heard tonight that there are a number of great proactive measures in place, but the level of intensity is increasing. And I don't know how we solve that problem, but I think it's a conversation we should have.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a conversation for today, but I think if I put us on a scale of proactive prevention and awareness on one side and crisis management on the other, my view of what we just saw was we are much closer to prevention and awareness than we are in crisis management. I think it's unlikely to say that you're ever going to get to a point where there's none of the crisis management piece. But, the increasing numbers or severity of cases they're seeing, I wonder if that is a function of the work that's being done at the lower levels to elevate it so people are seeking out services and not just leaving. Or, the growth of our Choices program, to keep kids in district where previously maybe they weren't even in our schools. I don't know. We don't have the data to show it, but, I would hate to jump to the conclusion that, we aren't being proactive yeah. No, I know. But I just, when I read that question, I thought, I'm not sure it's a one or the other. In one case, would we add positions? In another, would we cut? I'm not sure. But, I think what we saw tonight was a very balanced view of, what every kid gets. And then as we elevate up to higher needs, what we have available. So.
Just a quick follow-up. Don't disagree with anything you said. I think it would be, I appreciate hearing, especially from the high school, that we don't have the data, and that it would be good to get the data, and then we're going to be getting that. So I guess what I would propose is that maybe we don't have to have a full workshop, but we revisit where we are next year, and that we continue to have this be part of close to the budget cycle as well, And the other thing that I'm just curious about, and didn't really have time to delve into today, but I just wonder with the intensity of the concerns we have with children today, does it make sense? Does the guidance model make sense for our guidance counselors to have to do this academic, career, and triaging social emotional issues, or does something like a model like where there's a college counselor that we heard some of the other districts are doing, does it make sense to look at some other options? Nothing we can answer right now in this conversation, but it's something I'd like us to consider in the coming year.
Yep.
Sure. I guess my feeling would be I would want that coming from the high school. So, there are high schools that choose to have a different model. And if our high school staff and administration do not believe, they've chosen that model purposefully. There are advantages and disadvantages to doing it, I think, both ways. But, I would really hope that that's driven from the high school.
I'd agree.
Okay. And I do want to just remind the board that in the budget that we are proposing adding I'm trying to do mental math right now, but that the Endeavor program, the 3 RTIB, and the .3 nursing, those are all supporting the social emotional needs. So I don't want the board to feel like we're not moving forward with increasing staff in that area.
And I appreciate Cynthia highlighting what we have continued to add over the past several years. I mean, in every school in the district, there's been some impact for added staffing for that specific need. So, and I would say it's not even just the teachers. I mean, and maybe we just have the best bus driver on the planet, and so I'll give her a shout out. But I mean, she knows every kid's name. Every morning they get on the bus. Good morning, Garrett. How was your morning? Good morning, Lex. Like, they say their names, they say good morning, and so before they even walk into that classroom and have that morning meeting, they're getting that sort of positive interaction with school, which I think is fantastic.
I'm glad you pointed that out because we didn't include it in the presentation because you can see already how long it's been. But I think all of our schools are proactively working with the bus drivers. I know at Durham they do the Peaceful Bus. I know that Julie has been involved at Moore Street, Emily working with the bus drivers, Lisa. So we do a lot of teaching around those skills even on the bus.
So I imagine those transition times could be particularly difficult for some kids. Yeah. The bus and the lunch and all that stuff. So, yes.
So I had sent out a question about the student climate survey and whether RSU5 has ever done anything like that, just because that seems like another piece of information that could be really useful when we're assessing sort of what we're doing for social emotional supports. And the resource that I sent out, which was a state snapshot of from the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. The thing in there is, so it's for Maine, it's not for our district specifically, but the thing that struck me in that was that about half of students that they surveyed for that said that they did not report what they were experiencing, challenges in school, to anyone. So it just seems like that could be a piece of information, if kids are not talking to adults about that or their teachers about that. I'd love to see something like that where we're,
So we have not given that particular survey. We just checked with, I think, would you come to the mic?
We're saying the same thing.
Okay.
At both middle school and high school, we give the MyAS survey, and Maine Integrated Youth Health. Fifth grade too. So it's a survey that looks at school culture, looks at drug and alcohol, sexual activity, looks at a whole bunch of things. And it was put in the newsletter to give parents a heads up that came, because we actually did that last week at the middle school.
And then climate piece as well.
Yeah.
And we get individuals'
school
results, not just Maine.
Oh, great.
So the superintendent has that.
Okay. Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, thanks. And could I ask a follow-up question? Is that then a driver of some of the approaches that we take? The responses to that?
I would hope that
I mean,
we're
I'm sure it
making
is.
use of the survey results, right? Yeah. We hate to survey and not use the info, right? Okay, so any other questions before we move on and release all these folks for the time they've spent with us? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so back onto our agenda. No superintendent report, no administrator report, unless any of the folks before they race out of the building have something to say. Board comments and committee reports, none. I will say, I'm going to put a plug in here, even though it says NA, because my mic's on. Maddie and I went to the Durham Community School STEM presentation that Will and his STEM teacher and middle school science teacher put together, and I thought it was fantastic. And he shared some of his slides from the STEM teacher, sort of the progression of curriculum. It's great. It's really interesting to see a 10-year progression of STEM from pre-K all the way up through 8th grade. So we'll share that out with you guys, and I think he was going to send us his other PowerPoint that you should. Yeah, and we'll send that out too. It just had some interesting data about, STEM and how specific, this was specific to the Durham program, but, how they stack up against the state in terms of science and assessments and just how they make decisions on the curriculum and what they're going to include in there. So I thought it was fantastic, and I appreciated the effort that you guys put in.
I did as well, and I forget who said it earlier about the model of teaching when there's like a conflict or a challenge. You don't move to discipline. Cynthia, you were saying you don't move to discipline right away. I experienced that personally, not that I needed disciplining, but that I needed help. We were given a robot to program, and I was like, what? I don't, this, and I think I actually said, it's not working. And she kind of stood there and didn't help me. And Michelle was my co-student, and she was like, oh, I think you do this. Oh, and we figured it out. And then afterwards, Will pointed out, that's how we teach. That you accessed your resources, anyway. It was, to me, it's a little thing, but it's a mind-blowing example of how much education has evolved since I was in school. And thank you for the prompt, because I think I wanted to say that publicly, and I wish we could showcase that to more members of the community so they could see how education has evolved for the better, because it was very cool to experience it.
We should have waited till Will left so he doesn't get a big head, but.
It wasn't me, it was Nicole.
That's true. Okay, no policy for review. We're on to the budget, so budget update.
Okay. My budget update this evening is very short. We are expecting to receive the amount of our subsidy by Friday. So at our next meeting, we should have the page updated about the tax impact. And also, I just wanted to remind everybody that our first Q&A for the public, where we're hoping they'll come out and ask questions around the budget, will be March 20th here at the high school. And now I think we're on to Morris Street.
At 6 o'clock?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
So before our board meeting?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so Morris Street School, Julie Nickerson.
Okay, so actually, I'm kind of thankful that we're tonight after that workshop. It kind of helps pave the way for what we're asking for nicely. So Moore Street this year has 2 asks, and before I go into the asks, I was sitting there thinking how thankful I am to work in a district where the board has been so supportive. In my 4 years I've been here, as I look at what we've asked for and what we've been supported with, we've really grown so much in this social emotional response that we can provide to students. So I'll start with our RTIB EdTech ask. So I've just given you a visual that I hope will help you understand kind of where it fits. The audience for this document is really teachers, so just kind of keep that in mind. It's really a place where we clearly kind of document our process of what we're doing at each level of support for students as they present with social, emotional, or behavioral needs. So as you've heard tonight, our responsive classroom work, which, here's where my thanks come in. And I feel like we've layered these supports over time. And so I'm coming to you with an ask for a staffing need that now can support a plan that we have in place ready, a structure ready to support that person and the need the students are showing that we need to fill. So over our 4 years, we've built our knowledge and skill base in how to support students with these social, emotional, and more intense needs that we are seeing. So if you look, our tier 1 supports are the things that happen in the classroom. Our whole school is fully invested in responsive classroom, and that is a proactive approach to responding and building community, as well as setting kids up for success for their learning. At that level 2, we've just this year implemented a whole school screener, a social emotional screener. So we're kind of experimenting with it and playing with it in terms of what data that gives us and how it enables us to highlight students who need supports that we can get it ahead of. It's just flagging kids early. So hopefully in this tier 1, we're preventing things from bubbling. Our guidance counselor does short-term groups at that point. Like if we're seeing just a need, we really pride ourselves on trying to catch kids quick so that problems don't get bigger. But there are some students that do. Their gap is bigger, and we're seeing that we can't catch it with those tier 1 supports we have in place, and in which case we move them kind of to a more intensive support, and that's where the tier 2 piece comes in. We're kind of really identifying specific needs, trying to teach in with guidance. Again, that's short term because, as you've heard, the guidance counselors are in classrooms doing proactive instructional work with all students. And so their guidance groups happen, at recess, at snack time. So we're really trying not to impact academic instruction with those kind of short-term support groups. And then there's students that rise even higher. Their needs are greater. The intensity of support they need is bigger. And so they are on kind of this tier 2 intensive support plan. This is where our social worker comes in. So the 0.25 that we have of social work. So essentially Cindy is in our building 2 mornings a week. And then at Mars Landing, the other 2, and then the other, she flip-flops on the 3rd from week to week, or depending on need at the time. So she then comes in when we're seeing that these short-term guidance groups are not enough for particular students, or they are just needing more support across their day. The social worker will kind of oversee planning, and will put a more formalized positive support plan in place. Once one of those positive support plans are in place, it's pretty intensive. So we're looking at a check-in, check-out. We're looking at scheduled breaks. We're looking at them earning reinforcement. And so particularly at the elementary level, it's tricky for these students to do that independently. Like that, part of their social and emotional dysregulation is around their lack of independence in terms of those coping skills. So, if we're putting in this, okay, you can get through this hour and then you get a reinforcement, or even 30 minutes for some kids, we need somebody to be able to respond consistently. And so that's kind of the key around this request for the EdTech, is that it's a consistent response. So at this point, we have these plans in place. We have somebody to oversee them. We have somebody who's teaching into more intensive skill building with the group she's doing. But we don't have somebody who's available specifically to respond and manage and oversee these plans so that these students get a consistent response. So inadvertently, because sometimes it's me, sometimes it's the guidance counselor, sometimes it might be our RTI math teacher, because just that's how it goes. We're kind of reinforcing behaviors that we're really not planning on reinforcing, because even though the plan is consistent, we each have a slightly different nuanced kind of way in which we respond, or so it just means it takes longer when you don't have a consistent response pattern or the same person with the same skill. So these children are the kids who need, every time they come, I'm going to have this break. It looks like this. There's no room for wiggle. Here's how it goes. And then we kind of wrap them up and send them back to class as quickly as possible. So we feel like having a full-time ed tech that's specifically designated to kind of give this kind of support, it's going to just help our RTI system be even stronger to really support, and hopefully the goal would be that we can intervene early and that we wouldn't see these kids continue to need this kind of level of support, and that they would build that independence, and then we would be able to kind of fade this intense level of support they need. So how many students are we really talking about? So on average, and it's gonna flip and flop. Like last year, it looked different to this year. Last year, I had students with pretty intense needs, but there were less of them. This year, I have a few more students, but they're not quite as intense. So we're looking kind of at 2 to 4 students per grade level. And I'll include pre-K in that for us too. Children are coming with, as unknowns really. We have kind of 2 grade levels at Moore Street that are coming unknown to us, where we have half of our kindergartners who are coming not as part of our pre-K, and then we have our pre-K students who also can present with some of this social-emotional dysregulation that we need to respond to, because we've got a lot of 4-year-olds around who need somebody there to know that we're taking care of these other students who need extra help. So really, this ed tech would partner with a social worker. The social worker would oversee the plans, but the ed tech would be implementing throughout the day. Any questions around that? And then our other ask is for the addition of an additional first grade teacher. Our enrollment has increased dramatically. I think I projected 75 for kindergarten, and we have 87. And so moving forward into first grade, we will need a 5th classroom and anticipate needing to maintain 5 kindergartens.
I guess my question would be with that is, do you have space if you're adding like you?
So that has been a consideration. So what we have collaborated around, Laugh and Learn have space in our building. And so through lots of problem solving and conversations, Laugh and Learn will move to Mass Landing because they have space there. And then that will create the space we need for our additional classroom.
So will kids be bused, that do Laugh and Learn, be bused from Moore Street to Mass Landing?
So the idea is we'll still run a before and after care program at Moore Street. So it'll be kind of their preschool program that will be housed at Mass Landing.
Oh,
and
right,
then they'll have their own before and after
okay.
care.
So they're using a classroom during the day?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, got it. One of the questions, and I don't know if it's a question for everybody who requested the RTIB question, but one of Valley's questions that she had sent out was, last year we added a halftime for DCS and the middle school, and this year Moore Street, Mass Landing, and Pownell are requesting the same level of support. The 5 schools have very different enrollments and presumably different levels of student need. Could you please justify the need for halftime in your particular school?
So I can respond to that.
I think all of our RTIB ed techs are full-time, and the only one requesting a half-time is Pownell due to their enrollment.
Oh, okay. So we added full-time in Durham and the middle school. We're looking to add full-time in Moore Street and Mass Landing, and Pownell would be a half based on enrollment.
Correct.
Okay.
And I just have been talking to Will quite a bit around this because this is their 2nd year with their RTIB ed tech. And I think the numbers that are being serviced at Durham are the same as what they would likely be at Moore Street and Mass Landing. So they are servicing kind of K5. It's not a K8 position for them. They have it as a K5.
And is there only one in Durham, or is there 2?
Yes. One.
Okay, so
So it was 2 years ago that Durham came up with this concept, and so we piloted it there. And then last year, you funded it for Freeport Middle School.
okay, so they're doing it at the middle school, but Durham doesn't use them at the middle school. They use one person over 5 grades or 6 grades, and you're each looking for a full-time in both of those schools. But in terms of number of kids, it's similar. Okay.
You good with me?
Need my flow charts.
No.
Jeremy.
I just want to make sure that with this projected enrollment, this assumes adding that 5th teacher, right, for first grade?
Yeah, I think so, because I think it's set up above, they would be at 22 if they didn't.
Gotcha.
So.
Okay.
Any other questions for Julie? Don't feel bad, we'll make her come back if you guys have questions. We did it to Jen last time, so. And will, yeah. All right, so next up is Lisa, Pownell Elementary.
What Julie said. So actually, I had proposed to Becky that Emily, Julie, and I actually do it as a panel because we've been all working together on, this need and how are we going to solve this problem. And so, all of the things that she just talked about are the things that we're working on. I really appreciate what Maura brought up about the lack of services that have been sort of out for the behavioral health piece, because I do think with our youngest students, we're kind of seeing that impact them coming to school. I know in conversations I've had with parents, because we work closely with parents, right, Kate? They want to do right by their kids and haven't been able to necessarily access any in-home supports. And I do think with our youngest kids, that is having an impact on what we're seeing. I think the only thing that's a little bit different for us is that I want to kind of explain is that we have a little piece of a lot of people. So what we've established at Pownell is what we call our care team. I think Catherine may have mentioned that the nurse, myself, the guidance counselor, and our social worker meet once a week just so that we can really work on that consistency. Because right now we have a 0.4 social worker, a 0.5 guidance, and a 0.8 nurse. The addition of this halftime ed tech would really help those kids that aren't yet in special ed, but that are really finding that their dysregulation is a barrier to accessing their learning, would give us those sort of feet on the ground and help the kids practice in the moment how to use the skills that they're developing when they're in their friendship group or they're working with Nancy Rochat, who is our social worker. So it's that in the ground daily practice that we hope will really help students to feel like school's a safe place and a place where no matter what's happening at home, this is how we act at school, and this is how we can get our needs met when we're in this environment. So that's why we see this as an important addition.
Questions for Lisa?
Okay, thanks.
Welcome. Each one gets shorter and shorter.
Good evening. I want to echo Julie's gratitude too. When I was thinking about positioning this RTIB ed tech position, it really for us couldn't exist without the social work position. And so it really is a direct growth out of having been able to establish a foundation that a year ago we didn't have, and feels like we're moving closer to serving the needs of all of our kids. There's one additional piece I just wanted to mention that to me is really critical around this role, and that's with data collection. So kids, right now we have 8 students who are being serviced by a regular education social worker. And if we had this RTIB ed tech position, those students would be serviced by that individual as well. And many of these kids have really intensive support plans. So some of them have data collected in 15-minute intervals in the classroom. And we do that for a couple of reasons. We do it, A, so we can progress monitor if what we're doing is working. We do it because it provides feedback for students as they're working towards specific goals and developing skills that are connected to those goals. And then we do it because sometimes the reality is that RTIB is not enough, and that kids are referred for evaluation for special education services. And I think that's a slight difference of what we see pre-K to 5 versus 6-12 is we're still, and particularly pre-K to 2, still in the place where we are doing what we can through regular ed to identify and service the needs of kids. And data collection is a huge part of that if we decide that an evaluation is a great next step. So having someone right now, the data collection is falling on the shoulders of classroom teachers, on our social worker. You can imagine the aggregation for kids who have daily plans where data is getting collected every 15 minutes. That piece would also fall to this role, and that would be hugely helpful in ensuring we have accurate data about kids and able to refine their programming accordingly. But also, if we decide that we want to look at other options, we have data to support that further examination. So other than that, our only additional ask is an additional drama stipend. Somehow, miraculously, our 2 teachers who support our drama program, who've had over 100 kids every single year I've been at Mass Landing, have split a stipend in managing those 100 drama students once a week for the full school year. So now we're going to honor their efforts a little bit more with a full stipend for each of the adults who support that programming for our kids after school. Questions?
Jen.
So it's kind of to all 3, but you can probably answer it. So is the ed tech position the same sort of position at each school? It's like to follow those specific plans that are created, and those are for not special ed kids. Those are for regular ed.
Correct. These are all students. Sometimes they're students who have been referred for special ed and for myriad reasons may not be eligible for special education services, or sometimes these are students whose needs really aren't relevant to special ed, or sometimes they're kids who may later be referred for special ed.
So I'm guessing that as having been a former regular classroom teacher, that this also, like, one other huge benefit is alleviating a lot of stress on the regular classroom teacher. So I think that is, it's great that it's for the kids too, but I think that to look at it that way is really, it really kind of makes it a little bit heftier as a need.
And I would say not just supporting our classroom teachers, but all the kids in those classrooms, because these are really, like, the question came up about discipline earlier, and our response, we don't think is discipline as much as I think teaching in and seeing skills gaps. And for kids who have significant skills gaps, this is as hard for them as it is for me, right? When a student's melting in the hallway and screaming horrible things at me, I have the skill set, telling me she's not going to give me a Valentine's Day card. I have the skill set to be okay with that. But when you're 9 and your peers are seeing it, it's different, right? And it impacts the classroom, it impacts that student, and the best thing we can do for them is to help build their skill and create consistency, just like we do as parents for our kids, is create consistency in our response, and this would support us in doing that.
Do you think the 2 to 4 per grade level is kind of on par with what you would expect?
So right now I pulled up my numbers. So we have 3 in one grade, 4 in another, and 1 in a third. And I know Julie and I have, looked at our cohorts and see that kind of similar pattern.
Any other questions for Emily? Oh, Erica.
How much are you requesting for the stipend for drama? Is there a set amount?
It is a set amount based on, there is a formula that determines.
Oh yeah, where are we going to add those to our
I'm
sheets?
sorry. Yes, I just realized sitting here, I'm like, oh, I didn't put the amounts. So
each of
sorry
the
about that. I'll
stipends
try to get
has
better.
a level.
Yeah.
They're all leveled based on the number of hours that they do over the course of whether it's a season or a year, and so the amount of the stipend is based on leveling. And we actually have a stipend committee. Are you on that, Jeremy? Oh.
Jen
so you may know
Manny.
the answer to the question. But basically, they go through and make sure that it's actually part of the contract, the teacher contract. All the stipends are listed out, and then which ones we fund are based on need and that kind of thing. So I answered your question with, I don't know the dollar amount, but that's how it's figured out.
Well, and just to comment from the stipend committee, it's the number of hours that, so it's basically been 2 people have been doing this, and it's probably getting one. They decided to split it, is what it sounds like. But,
They decided to.
right.
They do it because they love it.
Right. Right. But with 100 kids, that's.
And they've been doing it for like at least 5 years that I'm aware of.
Yeah. No back pay. They're watching tonight.
Any other questions for Emily? All right, thank you. Bonnie, instructional support. This was a well-planned meeting. See, you would have had to come to 2 meetings if our last snowstorm hadn't bumped our meeting.
That's true. And actually, it was helpful to have the social emotional piece before this request, too. So that's good. In the last couple of years, we've had some students entering Moore Street School that had, and we talked about this earlier, the number of students coming into our district with emotional regulation issues, social skills issues, and a number of other, academic issues has increased. And so we've had to develop 2 different classrooms, and I call them self-contained classrooms because they provide more intensive level of support to a very small group of students. And we look at our classrooms as being like 5 or 6 students. So right now we have 2 specialized classrooms at Moore Street. Some of these students are second graders, so they're going to be moving to Mass Landing next year. And so we need to create a classroom for a very small group, 5 to 6 students, and that's going to require a special ed teacher. And we're looking at, I'm going to be able to reallocate some of the ed techs, not so much from Moore Street perhaps, but looking district-wide. So I'm requesting like 1 ed tech to place in this classroom. Any questions about that?
How many total ed techs are in a special ed classroom like that?
It depends on the needs of the students. Right now, we have about 3 to 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's 1 additional need, but 2 to 3 may move from other places.
From other places, yeah. And again, I'm looking more like at 3 for the Mass Landing program. And then the other request is because of the number of students coming in that need fine motor development, social skill development, sensory, motor, visual impairments, I'm looking at increasing our OT to full-time, which requires a 0.2 FTE. And she services the students in Moore Street School, Mass Landing School, a couple of students on consult at the middle school, and 1 student at the high school. So there are fewer as the students move from, kindergarten to 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, and then middle school and high school. They require less OT services. But our little ones at Moore Street and Mass Landing, there is a need for the additional 0.2 for the OT. I'm done.
I do have a question. For the Moore Street, the kiddos coming over from Moore Street School to Mass Landing School, right now do you have that same specialized self-contained classroom at Moore Street School?
We do.
And how does that not, or maybe it does align with what's currently offered at Pownell for the choices or the life skills program? Is it different level or different types of needs for those kids? I'm just wondering.
So the students that we had, I should say the students we had in Pownell that were in a self-contained classroom, most of them were from the Freeport, the town of Freeport. And so what we decided to do last year is to create a program at Moore Street And so the students that were in Pownell, and a couple of them, we're looking at having them in the Freeport schools rather than have them in Pownell. So we're just making a shift. So there isn't actually this year a specialized program in Pownell.
Julie might need that room back. Any other questions, Bonnie? Yeah.
Do you know offhand how many students receive the OT services?
How many?
Yeah, sorry to put you on the spot. I'm just curious.
Julie, do you know at your school?
Sorry for not asking that in advance.
There's quite a few. Let me think about it for a second, because I met so we just hired a new OT like probably a month ago, and I reviewed the whole caseload with her. It's probably, there's one at the high school, probably 3 at the middle school, so that's 4. They're mostly all at Moore Street. That's why I was looking to Julie. I would say probably around 20, 25 is what I would say.
What about Pownell and Durham? Do they have their own OT coverage?
They do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is just specific to the Mass Landing, Moore Street?
Yes, it is.
Any other questions for Bonnie? Great, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Oh, I lost my paper again. Oh, there it is. All right, so that wraps up tonight's episode of Budget Review. And moving on to consideration and approval of the 1920 school calendar, second read.
Hello, good evening. You have 12B. It looks like everybody has it.
Wait, before you start talking.
Okay.
Excuse me, sorry.
That's okay.
That was rude. Becky had a good suggestion that before we start, because sometimes we forget to do it, is take the motion and then we can have the discussion about it. So I would take a motion for consideration and approval of the 2019-2020 school calendar. Jen and Erica. Now we can talk. Well, you didn't have to leave.
Well, I write it down, but I didn't bring my sheet for my minutes, right? So Jen and Erica?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Okay. So my suggestion is that we talk about the top sheet first and then delve into the Columbus Day / Indigenous People option afterward, if that's okay with everybody. Because I felt like we were at a good place with all the dates already, but I just want to be sure that we feel at a good place with where everything is prior to moving on to the Columbus / Indigenous People Day conversation. So we had one question that came, I think it came up last time, and then I think it was also emailed again about moving November 8th. That's that 0.5 contracted day for professional development to December 20th. So I believe it was asked at the last meeting, but it was also resent to via email. And so I did talk with all of the administrators about that. They unanimously are not in favor of that for multiple reasons. And one of the comments was that I think the question was brought up because they felt that there were movies that are happening on that last day prior to, and I think I remember Jen saying, well, there's always a day before. Or somebody did, yeah, sorry. So anyway, if that's the problem we're trying to solve, maybe that could be handled in a different way other than moving that day. So that's really the unanimous recommendation of all the administrators, and a few of them are here. So I'm just going to pose that out there just to see if everybody is feeling good with the dates that we had discussed.
You said they had multiple reasons. What are some of their reasons? I'm just curious to hear.
It's just not a great day for professional development on the day before leaving for vacation. It's no different than the kids.
Thanks. I remember that now.
Okay.
No, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, we don't, there's 5.5 PLD days in the year. It's not a lot, and I would hate to lose that half day when maybe it's not the best bang for our buck.
Right. Want it to be meaningful and useful and transferable and all of that.
And as a parent who has to take the following week and a half off, I don't want to have to deal with a half day before. That's my opinion. Any other? Yeah, Erica?
So I actually proposed this question to a few students.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that question. Okay.
Yes, about taking away that day and if that's really all they do is play and watch movies. And she says, yes, we work really hard, and this is a time that they can look forward to and be with their friends at school. And when we talk about the social and emotional aspect of the kids, why can't they have a day off once a year, like where they get to go in and watch? I mean, yes, Fab Fridays are great. I do love them, but not everybody gets them. So I can see where some people might think that that's a waste of time if the kids are just hanging out, but I also see where it's a positive thing for the kids.
There's learning to be done in all those types of situations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I give support both ways, but my kids were upset thinking that they were not going to get the day before Christmas to do what they've been doing and whatnot. So
I'll just watch the movies in the morning.
So are we good to move on to the next section?
So can I ask one question?
Yes, absolutely.
And I apologize for not raising this earlier because it sort of came to me. One of the things that we had talked about earlier in the year, and forgive me, I don't remember who we discussed it with, but the idea of including other holidays on the calendar, not necessarily ones where they don't have school, but just for sort of awareness around scheduling of field trips, like, oh, that's during Yom Kippur. Or,
like Jewish holidays. And
Jewish or Muslim holidays, just so that, just for the awareness of it, so that things don't inadvertently get scheduled when there are students that might not be able to participate.
I think I raised that because that was actually something the school district.
We
in
saw it
Augusta,
somewhere, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
they were wrestling with that.
I think Brunswick might have. They don't have one on their draft, but I think the one that they actually print out does include some of those as well, so I have seen it. So would you like us to just choose the ones that, or inform you through? Because there could be Kwanzaa, there could be Rosh Hashanah. Yeah, so like how do we pick and choose, or? Like when I do Shutterfly, I can choose, and I make my calendars. You can choose you just click the box. They have a whole list of them, and you can click the box if you want them to show up on your final printed calendar. So there's lots to choose from. That's why, so if I think it's a great idea, but I would just wonder if you have recommendations of.
Yeah, if you think Brunswick is already doing that, maybe start
They
with
have a
theirs
few.
to
Okay.
see,
All right, that's a great
I don't know
starting
if we have to
point.
get too obscure.
Okay.
But
I mean, devil's advocate here. I mean,
put them all.
Well, a lot. I mean, a lot of those have spiritual, religious connotations, and we don't have that on our calendar currently. We just referred to it as Christmas break, but it's not Christmas break on the calendar. It's December vacation by design. So it would be, if we want to do that, would be changing it whole scale, right? We would be including all of these religious observances, which I think it would be great for building awareness of others, but it also could get pretty cumbersome.
Well, the other thing I was thinking is, I think each of the school has a calendar that they have on their website, and I don't know how in depth they use those calendars, but maybe just including it on there. I mean, if that's really where teachers and administrators are working through, making sure they're not double booking concerts and field trips, et cetera, maybe just having it on there is sufficient if that's our goal. I mean, I don't think it necessarily needs to be on our when we're not in school versus when we're in school calendar. I just thought we might want to include it somewhere on a calendar.
I'd be in favor of that.
So websites?
Yeah, I mean, if that's something that the schools are using, I think that would be a good way to do it.
Great. So we won't put it on this one, but okay, very good.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have a lot of space.
No, there isn't a lot of space. Nope.
Kate.
I'm I'm kind of in favor of doing that with any holiday that's on here. I don't think it needs an explanation of what it is.
So you think like Memorial Day, just not no school?
No school. Why do you need to label it as Memorial Day?
Because that's what it is. That's why it's a federal holiday.
It's just not. Why do you need it on this school calendar?
Because we're going to start getting all these parents are like, then why do we have that day off? What's that day? I mean, I think
Because they don't know when Memorial Day is.
no.
I'm thinking
honestly,
more Patriots Day, Veterans Day are the ones we'll get the questions on.
Why do we have Patriots Day on here?
Because we were part. No, not even New England. It's just Massachusetts.
Yeah.
It's because we were originally part of Massachusetts. Yeah.
It is.
Until 1820.
Yeah.
But it's not, it's a
Just a little lesson.
it's not a day. It's like during our April vacation.
Oh yeah, why is that one on there? That one is
Because it's a holiday for people who take vacation days.
It's a state
It's a holiday that's paid.
And so is President's Days during a
Right,
vacation.
right.
That's what I'm.
Yeah.
And I think there are some staff that use the calendar, and then it really shows them too that they have that day off.
That's the Columbus Day.
That's our nice segue.
That's a good segue. Yes.
So I'm just wondering, why are we lumping in this next conversation into approving the calendar? I mean, I understand they sort of go together, but can we just vote to approve the calendar? And
Yeah, I don't think we're voting
Okay.
anything on
Yep.
the Columbus Day thing. That's just more informational. So, yeah. So if we're good with the calendar, right?
Yes, because if you want to keep, if you want to keep that in October, national holiday there.
I am fine with that for the time being. I mean, if others feel strongly that we want to lead our state, I'm all for it. I hope that our state is going to move to make that Indigenous Peoples Day. Last year, it didn't seem like everybody was like-minded, but I'm fine with it just saying national holiday.
Because that's part of the vote, I think, because it's on there. So that's why I brought
if the
it up.
state is going to vote to make it Indigenous Peoples Day, then
it is.
Then
then
we'll
that's what it
change
will
it
become, right.
because it'll be like Patriots Day and Veterans Day.
Didn't we already change it to national holiday?
Yes, it's on there.
So would this be people want to vote on it again?
No, my question was really, I thought we were bringing this back to, because we landed on national holiday last year, but with the intent that this year we would discuss whether we would call it Indigenous Peoples Day or not. That was my interpretation, and maybe I'm incorrect, but.
No, I think that was our plan
Okay.
last year.
Okay.
And then we got all the way a full year later. We're like, oh, it's today.
Here's the calendar.
Here we are back at the calendar again.
Well,
We had a whole year.
I think it's important for us to consider the importance of this holiday in our district, and I think that so that's why it's lumped together. Yeah, I do think we need to have the discussion. I think I am fine with waiting on the vote for what we call it in the district. I feel like that it's fine the way that it is, but I think the more important question is it in our curriculum appropriately? We can revisit that other question after we see what the state does.
Okay. Yeah. Everybody comfortable with that? So any other discussion on the calendar? So we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor? Opposed?
You still want your vacation?
No, she wants to take the holidays off.
Thank you. So the attachment that you have, there was a request at some point. I'm not sure which of you made the request, but you wanted to see what are we really doing in the classrooms. So I sent this out to the administrators who then completed this. So this is just a snapshot of what's done by grade level at the different schools. There is no requirement to teach specifically anything certain in the curriculum around Columbus Day. That's not in the parameters of essential instruction. But it's just, I think it's been a tradition, it's been a holiday that has been done for many, many years. I think you'll find that at any district that you would do the same kind of a check-in, you would probably get very similar results. So that's just informational for you.
So we're seeing this play out in the state right now in Skowhegan, in the Skowhegan School District. And it, to my mind, lack of inclusion of perspectives on Columbus and on Native cultures in this country in the curriculum has led to widespread ignorance, which has led to intolerance and problems like what we're seeing happen in Skowhegan. I think, and we're not just seeing it here in the state, we see it nationwide. I think we should have this included in our curriculum to a greater extent.
So I think if you look at the parameters in essential instruction, it and the law about Native Americans, there's some things that we do need to include. And I think the other point to make is, that the way we teach points of view, reading from different sources, critical thinking, problem solving, all of those things are what we're trying to get. It doesn't mean you never say the word Columbus. It's, okay, he landed here. There's a monument. Why is he here? What did he do? What happened after he got here? How did that impact the Native Americans? And so I think those are embedded in there, and we probably do need to work on that. But I think that our instructional model, the strategic plan that we're working on, the way we present things throughout our curriculum has that flavor to it. I can't say I've not been in a classroom and seen a reading of a teacher in a discussion of when they're talking about Columbus to say that they're not sharing that point of view. I don't know if any of the principals here have any experience.
I guess, what is this showing us? Is this showing us what the instruction is around October, around that holiday?
Yes, that's all it's showing us.
I'm not.
And then the units in the upper levels and how they're connected, but in the lower levels, I think the question was what are teachers doing? So,
I thought we were looking at what's in the curriculum.
Okay.
I just want to know what's in the curriculum. Is it being addressed?
That wasn't the original question. The original question was, what was happening with the instruction around Columbus Day when you guys were discussing it last year? And so that was the particular question. It's not when do we teach explorers that was not the question. So we did a snapshot of, and honestly, when you changed it to national, what was it? National holiday. I think some of the teachers got nervous. Skittish and nervous and just I'm not going to read a book about Columbus on Columbus Day. So the question, we did not pose the question of, I don't think, nor would we, what do you teach about Columbus year long? We might pose a question if you wanted to know that about what are we teaching about explorers. If that's the question, then we could tell you where that is in the curriculum.
I'm not sure where the disconnect happened. I don't remember my question being specifically about just one day. But I want to ensure it's being taught in the curriculum. That coming from a concern that I have heard in the past, that there are other pieces of history that seem to be missing in the curriculum. So that's what I wanted to clarify.
Sorry about that. If we misinterpreted the question, I think that history is a subject that's, well, I think we heard this last time with Tim, right? You have to choose, right? who you're going to talk, which is why we really look at more essential questions. How do you have multiple sources, and you're able to read that and then kind of form your own opinion. But I think that it's really, I don't know of a list in Maine. I think they do exist in other states that say you have to talk about these particular people. Because I think there was a brouhaha somewhere where Hillary Clinton was taken off the list or something. But we don't have a list like that that says you have to teach that. If you look at our learning results, it's more, students will learn about, bigger issues like westward expansion or about explorers in general. But it doesn't give you the list of explorers that they should all teach about.
Right. They're really focused. In fact, Chapter 132 is under revision, and has the provisional approval, but it's not gone through all the way. And so the enduring themes, it's about the curriculum. So it's the learning results, parameters of essential instruction. And so for social studies, the enduring themes that are proposed now, but not in place yet, freedom and justice, conflict and compromise, technology and innovation, unity and diversity, continuity and change over time, supply and demand. Correct.
Maine is looking to.
Correct.
That's the proposal.
Yeah, and this has been in development for 2 years, the revision process. So it takes time. So, and it's meant to be revised periodically, and that's just the process that they're in now. So I pulled this up so that I could share that with you today. But like she said, there's nothing that says you teach this here specifically.
So
it's
interesting.
broader themes
It
as
seems
opposed
like
to.
In science, it seems like our standards in other areas are a little more specific.
Maybe because history of the world is so vast.
Well, and I'm not sure it is. It's really more going to themes. Like in literature, it doesn't say you will teach Moby Dick. It says you'll teach, comprehension, inferential
Research.
Comprehension, being able to cite several sources for evidence. So it's more big themes like that. It doesn't get that granular. Which I think that years ago, 50 years ago, there were, every high school is teaching, whatever, Pride and Prejudice. Right,
Scarlet
of Mice
Letter.
and Men, the Scarlet Letter. You've got to teach that, and I think there's been an evolution of, that's not, there's so much great literature. Let's not limit, but
Right.
let's ensure that when our kids leave and graduate from RSU 5, that they're able to read critically.
So thank you. This is helping me understand how curriculum works at the state and in the district. It's different than I imagined it. What do we do then as a district-wide to ensure that there aren't necessarily gaps in our instruction? Is that something that would happen like on a PLD day when you get like all the science teachers together or whatever, and ensure that there's not some oversight that's somehow
So there has been a lot of work done with this, and I guess there are going to be gaps. I think the way you're thinking of them, right? Because even if I tried to get the board to agree on, unanimously, what is essential learning, that is. It's going to take a long time. And I will say that moving to a proficiency-based system, the high school science, the biggest mistake that's made when school districts start that work is identifying too many things. Like, they have to know this. And then they find that it's not doable. And so getting science departments at the high school, I know we've done a lot of work at Freeport High School around this, about what is truly essential. We have spent a lot of time on things like that. on PLD days and other professional development, and trying to ensure that, in the end, I know we overuse that word, but making sure kids can really read and be critical readers, because there is no way, with the vast amount of knowledge that is out there, that they can learn it all. And we don't want them to, because a lot of it they can Google, and that's why you get into the themes, because that's what's really most important, that they're able to read things and think about it, discuss it, and then form their own opinions around it.
I'm guessing that a good example of that would be that we have a U.S. history requirement for 11th graders. There's no way that U.S. history, the entire U.S. history, is being taught in 1 year. So I'm sure it even varies from teacher to teacher, I'm going to guess. I mean, they have autonomy to pull in things that they, think are more relevant or that they think is more interesting. So, even kids coming out of RSU 5 aren't going to have the same knowledge in U.S. history as their next door neighbor.
Well, I think we are trying to work, and we've done a lot of work to try to make it pretty common, that those summative assessments are more similar.
Right, but
So-
not like you're going to...
Right.
You're going to talk about Richard Nixon and...
Well, correct.
Right.
So the proposal is having like a balanced approach to, a balanced amount of time spent on different eras, as opposed to every single thing that happened in that span.
I watched the video of the last meeting, which was great. I thought Jen and Tim did a really great job addressing the questions, including the ones that I had sent in, and that was an education for me as well. When Michelle and I were at Durham this week, I forget what it's called, but the science that what's
Next Gen.
Thank you, Next Gen. So that is, I believe it's not a state-based thing. That's a national thing that we've decided we like, and it's informing our curriculum. I'm hoping we have something, and please know, and I hope you know that I have so much faith in our administrators and in our teachers, and I think they do an amazing job. So none of this is coming from a concern that we are woefully deficient, but just that we are staying on top of evolving needs in our communities. Is there anything like Next Gen at the national level that we look to inform our curriculum? And are we holding ourselves accountable to, is there some way that we are regularly reviewing curriculum and holding ourselves accountable to ensuring that we're providing the best that we can?
So Common Core, those are like national standards. And so those...
Do those cover social studies?
No,
They cover
no,
math and
they
ELA?
study ELA and math, and then Next Gen is science, and there are national social studies standards, but I don't know.
We don't follow. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The National Council of Social Studies has.
Could you come to the mic? Thank you.
Generally, by the fourth word, she's going to tell you to come to the mic. It's more than 4 words. Come on up.
The National Council of Social Studies has standards, but they're thematic, so they don't get to the level of granularity that you're noting.
But I mean, I kind of like the thematic piece of it, sort of the I can't even remember any of them that you said, but, unity and diversity. I mean, you can see the things that have happened in history that really speak to, what some of those could be. And, and I'm guessing that's where the curriculum directors and the teachers and the department chairs are really saying, wow, this really, civil rights fits into this theme that we want to make sure we're covering really well, and how can we use this piece to get to that, to get to that standard or to that theme. I mean, and I can reinforce what you're saying about, trying to get the kids to see all the different sides. I just got an email in fourth grade. They did a debate on westward expansion. Was it a good idea or was it a bad idea? And obviously it depends on your perspective of who you are. And the kids were forced to pick a side, and they may be not even the side they agree with, but they had to build the evidence, do the research, and then they, had their debate on, westward expansion. And it was interesting because that email came in while we were all talking about this piece of it, and I thought it was a good example of, there's certainly a lot of different potential views of that, and just how they're teaching our kids that, not everything is, the Oregon Trail game is great, but they all die of dysentery, So, it's not all, everything's not good just because it says so in a game, or in a book. There's multiple sides to everything, and trying to make them critical thinkers so that they don't just accept what they're told and ask other questions. So, thought it was a well-placed email from the fourth grade teachers. Yeah.
I'll just close with this thought, which is that I appreciate this whole conversation, and I can appreciate the way it's in broader areas. I hope, I imagine, but I also hope that we are giving our teachers every freedom that they need within the curriculum to be able to include these big topics of the day, these big local, challenging, controversial, with many diverse and strongly held opinions topics in their classroom. And full disclosure, part of what this is coming from is anecdotally I've heard in the past, way before I was on this board, some fear from some teachers that this isn't in the curriculum and we can't teach it. We don't feel we are allowed to. And I really hope that's not happening. So some of my questioning has been to suss out, is that what's going on? I hope that's not what's going on. Doesn't sound like it's what's going on, but I just want to make sure our teachers are feeling empowered to bring that to their classroom.
Okay. More.
So to one of Maddie's or the previous commenter's points, about what we're teaching about Columbus and other parts of the curriculum, I had asked Becky if we could get more information about Native American history and how that's being taught in her curriculum. In our curriculum, so I know she committed to providing that in a future board update. So I'm kind of wondering, does that broaden it too much to add in? If there's something additional that you're wondering about, Maddie. I know we just discussed that the teachers have leeway in terms of what topics they're looking at, but I feel that we're really evolving in our awareness and our thinking on some of these things, and I think it's great if our district and our teachers evolve too. And I'm not saying that they're not, but especially with a lot of things that are happening in our state, just that we're forward thinking in terms of what we're teaching our kids. So it will be great to hear the update from you, Becky, and I don't know if Maddie then you wanted to piggyback on any of that, but
I think it would be nice in board updates to hear, maybe snapshots of what's new. I would love for us to have a little more insight into some curriculum pieces, at least once a year. I'd like to know a little bit more about how those decisions are being made.
All right. Yeah. She's like, oh my gosh, do we have to do the social emotional thing again? Not that it wasn't great the first time. Yes, you voted no. Okay, so personnel. So consideration and approval to employ a health PE teacher at Freeport Middle School for the 2019-2020 school year.
So I make a motion somewhat reluctantly to nominate Darren Carter for this position. And as many of you know, he is the current assistant principal at Freeport Middle School. He's been in that position for the last 2 years. He's done an outstanding job. But his love right now is really in the classroom, and I worked hard in trying to talk him out of this. But this is where he feels like he's meant to be right now, and I'm just delighted that we're able to keep him in the district. And so I know he previously was the health teacher there at Freeport Middle School, did a fabulous job, and I know he'll also do a fabulous job in this role.
So if we vote no, does he have to stay in his current position? Oh, all right then. Okay, so do we have a motion? Oh, yes. Well, let's do the motion in a second, and then we'll do questions. Jen and Maddie? Yes, Erica?
Does this mean there's no more Mr. D?
Well, he'll just be the health and PE teacher.
So that's what Mr. D was doing, wasn't it?
No, this is for Freeport Middle School, not Pownell.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
I want to keep him as long as we can.
Yes, Kate?
Do we, is it unusual for us to fill a position this time of year for next year? Is it?
I don't think so, because I think what we're learning is that we want to get out in front. So I know last year we started advertising earlier. Yeah. And if you remember that Joe Cormier is retiring, and so that's what created the position. And Ray and I have known that Darren has wanted to get back to the classroom, and that, so that's what kind of, I guess in some ways, yes, it is a little early, but because of the circumstances, it's not early. Yeah.
That's all I wanted to know.
And then this will give us time to advertise for the assistant principal.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any other questions? All those in favor? Reluctant yeses?
With reluctance, but thank you for staying, and please don't go. Ever.
Public comment? Anybody hiding back there? When I first saw Lindsay come in, I thought we had someone from the public who was going to speak, but she had a hat on, she was secret. All right, so I would take a motion to enter into executive session as outlined in 1 MRSA Section 4056D for the purpose of discussing administrator negotiations with RSU 5. John and Mara, thank you. All those in favor? None opposed? All right. I don't know what time it is. 9:22.
But Lisa beat you too. Yeah, two. And then yours, yours was 6. All right. I have to go get the names out. Lisa. Are you keeping